Right, good evening everybody. I'm so nervous, not really, but it is so lovely to see this place full, and I welcome you all. And I need to make a special mention to Brian's family, the madam, Charmaine, Shireen, and Nick, and sister. Oh, sorry, and well, Beverly was supposed to be here, couldn't make it, and special friends. And it's just from a long way away, he came up here especially to listen to this, is Vaughan Griffin and Joycey. And I remember way back when we were in the airline, that Vaughan said that Joycey is the latest one who's wasted his name. But we love you, Joycey. Okay. And I hope that what you hear tonight is going to be as enthralling a tale as I've had the preparations, doing the preparations for this evening. Man, this guy has done something, but then you decide yourself. I'd like to make a special mention this evening of Trixie's passing, who most of you knew Trixie, and most of you were unable to be at her memorial. And she was an integral part of our auditorium activities. And Thea Ilsley brought along this little display over here, which I think is what a lovely gesture. Thank you so much, Thea. You'll remember her fondly. Maury Reddy has been the main driving force to revitalise our Flying Legends talk shows. And this being the second of the series in this revamped auditorium. And the whole project was driven by Maury. Hey, you don't want to get on the wrong side of her. She'll fix you up like this building. And also there are many other EAA members that were involved, and I can see a couple here like Eugene Kazane, who also contributed heavily, and Archie Kemp. The sound system this evening has been run by Kevin Master, Kyle Baytop, and Mike House, and we'll keep a beady eye there, please, Mike. And also to the Briars, Kun Potty, Ronnie Alcock, and the pub, which has been run by Stephen and Maury, which is really tremendous. Everybody taking part to make this good. I'd also like to say special congrats and a massive vote of thanks and gratitude for having achieved our ARO renewal. The ARO is Aviation Recreation Organisation certificate that we are required to have by CAA. And this has been a mountain of to climb. And it has come about in the last day or two. So to the guys that were involved, led by Maury mainly, Paul Lestucci, Sean Cronin, Mark Kulo, and others. But thank you very much, and congratulations, and thanks very much. What it means with this ARO is that all our performances in the EAA are being monitored by CAA, which is, it's fine. There's nothing that we do that CAA that we are ashamed of, that CAA has to come and watch us. But now they require this licensing procedure. So we're all ready to go. Right, and now we will start with our show. That I want to just tell you about Brian Trevor Stableford. And he's reached a point in life where you can teach time to fly, said Jim Bester, whose wife Brian called a liberal fascist, and told that history is a set of lies agreed upon. I've got quite a few notes here which I'll just go through, and then after that it's over to Brian. John Gillsby, sitting in front here, second master at Pretoria Boys High and a noted historian. He said, I regard it as a great privilege to have flown with Air Marshal Stable flights, and I've come to know him as a friend. His flying stories are fascinating. He is someone of wide interest and knowledge who will happily discuss history, politics, and any number of other subjects. Dave Taylor, who was the fleet manager when Brian worked under him in the airline, and he said he's a wise old, slightly eccentric, reliable and fastidious aviator of note. I think that really sums it up. Andy Keel and Nigel Keel from during their PPL training, both Andy and Nigel are the products of his tuition. Nigel having recently retired as a senior captain at EAA. And during a sharp turn onto finals, a steep turn onto finals, they report from the Stableford Flying School of Etiquette. Just hear this. If we spin in now, you'll be dead before we hit the ground. Laurie Ratu is here. Laurie is sitting over here. He said, Brian did not strive for popularity, and woe is the one that offers him incompetence of any sort. He gained respect of those who knew him well and operated with him, as he had the mark of a true and reliable leader. Wonderful. Now, okay, we'll carry on and we'll come back to that. I've got other stuff there. Now, what happened here was Brian was at Pretoria Boys High at some stage, and his parents moved to Rhodesia. And that's where we kick off, and Brian had to make a career choice.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for those kind words. I'm not sure how I earned them, but I'll do my best. What you see on the screen are pictures chosen by Carl, and I respect it. The group in front of that looks like a DC-4, but it's a C4 Canadair. The Canadair was a Canadian DC-4 with Merlin engines, and it also was pressurized, which made a difference. The next picture was taken, I'm sure you recognize Ian Smith, and on the right-hand side of Ian Smith is my father, and on the left-hand side of Ian Smith was his recently married wife, Barbara. Now, Barbara had been Ian Smith's secretary, and my father obviously took a shine to her, married her, and he really got his comeuppance because Barbara didn't take shit from anybody. And the girl on the left, as I sit here, is my sister, who sadly can't be here tonight. She's down from Zimbabwe. She has the beginning stages of Parkinson's, so she thought she was a little bit frail to come here tonight, so I'm very sorry she's not here. Thank you.
Okay. Brian, what I want you to emphasize is how you came to a career choice.
Okay. My father was in the SAF, having been at the military college before the war, and after the war everybody took 3 or 4 steps back in rank. And then followed an unhappy period in the SAF, where they had an eccentric character called Erasmus as Minister of Defence, and he wreaked havoc amongst the wartime SAF officers, and they slowly started leaving. And most of them went up to Rhodesia to become tobacco farmers. My father didn't see himself as a farmer, and he joined the Rhodesian Air Force. I arrived in Rhodesia at the age of 14, and it didn't take me long to realize that the Rhodesian Air Force was not going to be big enough for both of us, because by then, coming from a military family, I thought there had to be another way. Luckily, it's not very well known anymore, after World War II, in recognition for services from the colonies, the RAF allocated cadetships to Cranwell, of which by 1961, when the selection took place, Rhodesia was the only country that still took up this offer. So I naively applied for a cadetship at Cranwell. I had to go to my headmaster and beg him on my bended knees to tell the RAF that I would pass my A-levels, which he very kindly did. And there were 5 of us up for selection. They did the normal hoops and loops and square pegs and round holes aptitude tests. And there was one guy in amongst us 5 who had an IQ of 120, and he looked like he was a winner by far. And at the end of the selection process, we went before a selection board consisting of 2 RAF officers and 3 Rhodesian Air Force. They were senior officers. And the guy in the front of the queue, sadly, was very immature. He was a mother's boy, and his mother dominated him horrifically. So he crumbled on the selection board, and it removed him from the front line. And I, as the runner-upper, I got the job. Finishing my A-levels, which the headmaster promised I would pass, I got on the boat and headed to England.
That's where you started.
Yeah.
Right, so that is Cranwell, the Royal Air Force College, and that was the start of it all, and that was in 1962, and over to you, Brian.
Okay, on the 1st of January 1962, the 86 entry of 62 assembled at the college, and we were divided up into squadrons. You will see before you there, Carl's put a circle around me, and just in case you didn't recognize that cavalry youth. There were 11 of us who started off. And to give you an idea of the attrition rate in those days, only 5 of us finished the course. When we got there, we were billeted in what was known as the South Brick Lines. They're not there anymore. These South Brick Lines had 5 cadets per hut. And we were allocated those huts. I'm not sure if my hut compliment comes up, but I'm not going to bore you with who was who at the zoo. It'll reveal itself as we progress. I can't believe I'm saying this. There's a very, very junior flight cadet in the colour picture, and a guy in his vest blue with white belt, which is the ceremonial parade kit that we had at the time.
Okay, and your first one was the stabilization.
Yeah, Scramble had the same leave system as universities. There were 3 terms, and there was about a month, approximately a month's leave in between the terms. So 2 of us who are seen in the middle, either side of the gentleman in the white jersey, decided we would go and visit. Pete Seymour's father was an air commodore at NATO, which at the time was based at Fontainebleau, and that was just before de Gaulle invited NATO to pack its bags and leave France. So we went to visit Pete Seymour. It was the time of the Algerian uprising, and if those of you who've seen the movie The Day of the Jackal, you remember there was a coup in the French army and an attempt to assassinate de Gaulle. So we arrived on the ferry boat in military gear, as you can pretty well see we were wearing there, and we took the ferry to Dunkirk. Now Dunkirk was my very first ever impression and view of wartime Europe, because even though it was 1962, there were still bullet hole marks in the buildings in Dunkirk, and I think we all know what happened in Dunkirk. So we decided that we would hitchhike to Calais and then take a train to Paris. Well, wearing military gear at that time in France made us persona non grata. So we walked, spent the whole day walking from Dunkirk to Calais, and the distance is 39 kilometers, and I know because I walked every single meter or yard. So when we got to Calais, being cadets on a pay scale of 10 shillings a day, we didn't have the wherewithal to go into a local hostelry. So we bought some bread rolls and salami and bottles of wine and went to the remains of the leftovers of the trenches of World War II and spent the night in those trenches. We had a lovely time in Paris, and it was a big eye-opener for me, and on the right-hand side you could see myself having got back to Trafalgar Square on my way back to Cranwell. Being a colonial, I had nowhere to stay in England. I didn't know anybody, and if I didn't go back to the college, I was going to be without shelter and without food. When I got back to the college, I noticed on the North Airfield, which was grass, a gliding camp going on. So I rocked up at the gliding camp and made myself useful, and I was duly inducted or impressed into picking up glider wings and making do. And on the second day, they said to me, would I like to go for a flight with another flight cadet who was so-called passenger qualified. And those of you who know of the RAF gliders, they had a thing that looked a little bit like a Catalina with no engines. It was called a T-21, a side-by-side dual aircraft. And we used to go up in a launch to about 800-900 feet, and then you would have to very hastily join the circuit to get back on the ground. So on the downwind leg, this cadet said to me, and I didn't know the guy, he said, would you like to fly? I said, thank you. I took control, and everything I did was wrong. The aeroplane mushed and swallowed and literally fell out of the sky, and he only had about 10 seconds where he had to grab the airplane back or the glider back again, so he took control and landed. I climbed out of that T-21, absolutely demoralized. I thought, I've come all this way to learn to fly, and I fly like a bloody idiot. There's just no help for me here. So I went and sat behind a truck with my head clasped in my hands, feeling very sorry for myself, and a little while later I heard my name being called, and I rushed to the front to be issued to a real genuine Bedouin RAF flying instructor. Well, if I told you that I went solo the next day, you'd probably think it's impossible. I think I did 7 or 8 launches in the T-21. And they didn't send you solo in the T-21. The aircraft you see in front of you there was a thing called a Kirby Cadet, which was designed in the 1930s. And so that, in fact, was my very first solo flight, before the flying course even started.
One day.
Okay, in the late summer of the first year, we were taken on leadership survival course up into Scotland. And there we were grouped in 2, 4, 5, in groups of 5. Carl's put a ring around me again until you didn't recognize that sallow youth again. Now the guy on the right, standing aside with the staff in his hand, was a Sandhurst cadet that had been seconded to us. So we treated him with disdain, and it rained all the time, so we were sopping wet, and we lived in a tent. And that evening, we climbed out of our sopping wet clothing and got in our sleeping bags. And that Pongo got in his sleeping bag and his wet clothes. And we thought, he's nuts. The next morning, we got out of our sleeping bags and had to climb back into our wet clothes. He got out of bed and he was dry. So we learned a big lesson from that. Okay, the first year at Cranwell was largely academic, which we'll explore a little later on. So as a consolation prize, they let us fly a chipmunk once a week. It was a properly structured course. We had a very qualified kosher RAF instructor, and we flew the chipmunks off the North Airfield, because Cranwell was a Royal Naval Air Station in World War I, so the southern part is a normal tarmac runway and the north was grass. And the first aircraft I flew was WG 689 in May. And only because I looked up in my logbook the other day, in June I went solo in the same airplane by sheer coincidence, and I've tracked its lineage down on the internet, and I find right now it's living in France, and I hope it's having a happy life there. We then moved on. The second year we started the proper flying course on the Jet Provost. The Jet Provost basically was the same as an Impala, but the side-by-side seating arrangement, not a tandem like an Impala. It had the same engine, had the Viper engine. The blue stripe around the fuselage indicated it was a Cranwell-based aeroplane. Although this airfield was not Cranwell, the A and B squadrons were based at Cranwell, and C and D, which I was C squadron, were operated out of an old wartime base called Barton Heath. So what you see on the runway there is Barton Heath. Now, okay, sorry, carry on.
Let's go back. Sorry.
I remember the interesting phase there, about a month or two into the course, just to go back one stage, the RAF had decided to do all through jet training, which is why they used the jet promise. We were the first year to be on jet promise. Before that, they had piston promise and vampires. So they had a mixture of a tail drag and piston promise, which they had in the Rhodesian Air Force, and then they also had the jet promise. Now, strangely, and I think the SAF went through the same metamorphosis, the Air Force or the RAF paid no attention to any of weaknesses experienced by the cadets on their once-a-week occupational therapy chipmunk flying. And every single one of the cadets who struggled on chipmunks failed the jet promise course. And I think they woke up later, as the SAF did, and brought the Harvard back, because I only flew a Harvard when I was 49 years old, but it was not a very forgiving airplane. And a Harvard will bite you in 10 hours, and an Impala will take 30 hours to reveal the same weaknesses in your flight. Yeah. Okay, this is going a bit of a fast forward. The wings course was done at Cranwell, and the subsequent pictures will reveal that. At the end of the first year, being academic year, Cranwell was divided into three streams. The scientific orientated guys did the Associated Fellowship, Aeronautical Fellowship exam, the AFRAS exam, which is basically a BSc, and then the arts guys did a sort of a BCom, and the also-rans like me did a bit of this and a bit of that, and not too much of either. And one of the things we did there, which I'd never heard of in my life, was in mathematics a subject called calculus. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of calculus, but we had an instructor who was only in the Air Force to play rugby, but there was no position in the Air Force for rugby players, so he was a maths instructor. And he would come in the classroom, he barely had ever turned around to face us, and he would do lots of drawing on the blackboard. And at the end of the first year, we had to write a maths exam. And I don't know whether the Air Force paid too much attention, but we had a 100% failure rate. The entire class failed the exam. Now, at Cranwell, if you failed the exam, you didn't automatically write 7 days later. Well, the second attempt, I think 3 guys out of the 9 of us passed the exam. And the rest of us were frog-marched in front of the assistant commandant. The assistant commandant, who had just taken over the post, was no less a person than Al Deere. And those of you who know anything about the Battle of Britain know that Al Deere was one of the more famous of the few. And I was the first one to be marched into his office, and I stood rigidly to attention, staring at the corner of the ceiling, which I tried to look inconspicuous. I'd never met the guy, and this delightful New Zealand accent said to me, "Ah, Stableford," I'll do my best New Zealand accent, "I see you've had an inferior colonial education." I didn't know what to say, and then I glanced down, and there's a big smile on his face, and he said, "We can't hold that against you, can we?" So thanks to Al Deere, I escaped the chop, because the other guys who didn't pass were recoursed back one entry, and I then carried on, and I thought the only way I'm going to survive here is to report to this idiot who pretended to be a maths instructor, and I knocked on his doors, and waltzed in and he looked up in horror and I said, "Sir, I'm reporting for extra lessons, sir." And the dismay on his face was palpable. So much so, he went through the motions and I went through the motions, and none of us got anywhere. When I wrote the final maths exam, I passed by 1%. For only reason he didn't have the heart to fail. Okay, then we carried on from there. Then came, after that, at the end of the year, we went to the survival course. And the following year, we went on to provost. And during my time at Cranwell, the RAF had a delightful policy, if you like, where you could think up any crazy system you liked, and if you put a plan together properly, they'd pay for it. So in the first year, we took canoes to Sweden, and we canoed up across Sweden from Gothenburg up to Mem, which is on the Baltic. And then we had a combi, and we drove up to Stockholm, where we were hosted by some Swedish Air Force officers, and drove back to Crown. And this continued. On the second year, we decided to canoe, because canoeing was the... But before I go there, I just want to tell you another story. I got to Cranwell and they said, "Hands up those who played rugby." So I put my hand up. And I was put in a rugby team, and we drove to Nottingham in a snowstorm and played rugby in the snow. And I thought, this is not going to work. So I got back and I looked around and I said, "What sport is there in this country that doesn't have to be outside?" And they found that shooting had indoor ranges. So I became an expert shotist. And that's when I stayed for the rest of my career. So much so at the end, unbeknown to me, when they came to hand out the kudos at the end of the course, I found I'd been given my shooting colours. But how that happened, I could not tell you.
Just information.
Okay, the following, after Cranwell, they split us into two courses. The fighter pilots went to Valley, which is in Anglesey, and they flew the Foland Gnat, which I think Jeff Fish did. Jeff, you out there somewhere?
Yeah, that's right.
Jeff flew the Gnat. A delightful little aeroplane. And the rest of us also ran, so we were either going to Transport Command, Bomber Command, or Coastal Command, went to Oakington, where we flew a varsity. Now, the varsity was built expressly for the RAF as a crew trainer. You'll see that almost pregnant belly underneath, which is a little bomb bay, and in the front was a prone position where the bomb hammer would lie. And if you really wanted to scare yourself shitless, when you did circuits, if you lay in that bomb bay, you thought you were going to scrape your chin on the runway on the roundhouse. But we had, at the time, there was a very bad morale problem in the Air Force. Bomber Command, and unfortunately, one of the guys who was in SA with us, Louis Nell, who was in Cranwell 3 years before me, he was at Waddington when they had a guest night, which turned out almost to be a mutiny, and there was some fast footwork done to try and repair the damage. And the morale was very, very low. And we had a wing commander flying at Oakington who was ex-Polish, with the delightful name of Stanislaus van Zielak. And Stanislaus van Zielak, under the bone dome, he had a cloth hat, cloth cap, and he would keep a monocle stuck up the side. And when he flew with you, every time you asked for a power setting or a gill setting, whatever, he'd pull out his monocle, pop it in his eye, and then he would make suitable adjustments and put his monocle back. Well, he was an eccentric, and his answer to the morale problem was he got, I think it was a 6-ship formation, of which you can only see, there's me and 4 other airplanes, there was another airplane alongside it. And he took this 6-ship formation, and we went around all the flying schools and we beat the shit out of them. And that was his cure for the morale problem. And you know what? I think it worked. The other one is, this is poetic because Sadly today we heard that EAA lost a calibration aeroplane out of George. And if you could see the writing on this is Royal Air Force, and behind the engine cowling it said Signals Command. And this was the RAF's calibration airplane. This was taken at a base in Arabia called Salalah. And I just landed there in the Argosy behind, and the sparsity turned up, and I thought it was very poetic, but I took the two pictures of the airplanes together. And that's why they're standing together at this base called Salalah. Trip that we canoed, we got into the water in Bordeaux, and there's a canal going up the River Bordeaux, and alongside it called the Canal du Midi, which is quite a heavy metal waterway. And there on the right hand side, there is our eating arrangements beside the canal. Obviously I'm boasting, I'm not about to eat that bread roll. The two gentlemen in the canoe have an interesting postscript. The guy behind me was a New Zealand Air Force cadet who won the Sword of Honour. A very fine gentleman, and he really excelled, very much excelled at Cranwell, and thoroughly deserved the Sword of Honour. If you fast forward to 5 years ago, when we had the 50th anniversary of the passing out parade, after the New Zealand Air Force, he went on and flew, the guy who did the Lord of the Rings was?
Peter Jackson. Tolstoy.
No, the producer. Jackson. Jackson was very fond of aviation, and he created a World War II fleet. And John Lennon not only flew the World War I airplanes, he also flew the Spitfire, the Kitty Hawk, and a very strange Russian airplane called a Polikarpov. So he sent me a lot of pictures of his really bum and the butter end of his flying career, and inadvertently he included a press release. So I read the press release, and it was a pretty normal press release, except at the end he said when he was at Cranwell he won the Sword of Honour and the Battle of Britain trophy, which was the aerobatic trophy. I thought, that's interesting. I thought I did. Now, the poor guy, I think a nanosecond after he sent me the email, realised his faux pas. And he sent a letter of apology, which I really felt sorry for him. And I wrote back and said, John, please do not let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That was just your copy, eh?
Sorry?
Your copy.
Yes, there was the copy. They had 3 canoes and they would have 4 crews. So there would be 3 men in the water per day, and we would rotate. So every fourth day it would be your turn in the water. Now on the French expedition, because we had to pad it to get the Air Force sponsorship, we were supposed to canoe up the Canal du Midi into the Massif Central, which is a port of France I don't know very well, where we would translate into a downhill canal going towards the Mediterranean. But having got up to the top of the Massif Central, we decided we'd had enough, so we just drove all the way, because we had been invited to visit the French Air Force Academy at Salon. And so we rocked up there, we had to carry our best suits with us, and we rocked up there and spent a delightful 3 days being entertained by the French Air Force cadets. And it was there that I realized what a cushy life we had at Cranwell. The French were brutal. They manhandled and mishandled their cadets to a horrible degree. I was amazed how many of them were on crutches. They'd obviously they do what the French do so well. My theory about France, by the way, is that they cut the head off the gene pool in the French Revolution. And what's left is what you got in France. I hope there are no Frenchmen in the crowd. I beg your pardon. Okay, this shot here, Karl chose a lot of these pictures because he rightly found there was an ambience and a scene we had to paint. On the left-hand side was the notice board hall, which had those sport, and on all the walls were pictures of cadets going back to the 1920s. And by the way, Douglas Bader went to Cranwell before that beautiful building coming up on the next slide appeared. And a small anecdote, when I was a senior cadet in 1964, Douglas Bader arrived for a meeting of presumably Battle of Britain. And he was instantly recognizable, not only by his face, but by his gait with his crossed legs. And I was then 21 years old, and I remember thinking to myself, God, this guy looks old. And he was born in 1910. So he was 52 years old. And there I was as a 21 thinking, God, this guy looks old. Little did I know it was coming. On the right-hand side is the dining hall at Cranwell, which is very, very well appointed and the kind of place that officer cadets were meant to learn how to be officers after they were cadets. I took this picture at the end of the winter of the second year when everyone was away, and being a colonial, I'd say at the cadets' mess, at least at the college building. You can see the snow on the roof except for that patch above the right-hand side, which in fact was the library. And I presume they kept the radiators going while everybody was away, which is why the snow melted. It was a beautiful library, but most awe-inspiring of all was a huge desk, which I sat at often. And in the center was a little brass plaque that said this was the desk of Air Marshal Arthur Harris, Bomber Harris. So to sit at Bomber Harris's desk as a cadet was quite an awe-inspiring experience. In the middle of Christmas, they invited, I think there were about a dozen cadets. Every year the French Air Force would invite a dozen of us cadets to go to their ski school at a place called Ansel, which I later learned from a Swiss friend of mine, because we flew a DC-4 from Nice back to Zurich, and we went right over the top of this little village, Ansel, and I was told it was called the Route Napoleon, because Napoleon had a habit of invading neighboring countries, so it's very convenient pass of the hills. So there the 9 or 10 of us learned to ski. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, the weather was fantastic. There was no snow, so the normal snow runs were worn thin, and it meant that all the corners had turned to mud. So we found ourselves falling in the mud, or being taken higher and higher into the mountains to get more snow. And the higher you went, the steeper the slopes got. So it turned out to be a really fragrant experience, but nevertheless very enjoyable. Okay, at the end of the course, at Berks and Heath, the C and the D, the survivors of the C and D entries, from where I'm sitting on the right-hand side, with the Jensen circle around me again, is C Squadron, on the other side was D Squadron. And it was around about this time that we had the entry aerobatic competition. Well, I was the guy selected from C Squadron, and I duly went through, and they had rules about the confinement of the sequence and the altitude limits. And rather like being selected for Cranwell, the guy who won the competition bust his altitude limit. So the runner-up won the prize. And here you have the passing out ceremony. I'm getting my wings from the commandant, who was a man called Michael Line, Air Commodore Michael Line, getting my wings on the left and being presented with the Battle of Britain prize. And that was fairly recently presented to Cranwell by no less a person than Al Deer, who had prevailed on the Battle of Britain survivors, or not, there were many of them in those days. And you can see that it looks like a bat, but in fact it's a crane, because Cranwell was named after a Norman nobleman by the name of the crane bowl, which presumably meant in French the crane, which is why they designed the trophy that way. There on the left you have the passing out parade. It was a bitterly, bitterly cold day and a miserable day, and only because I was the last guy on the line, the official photography took this picture of me and the Air Marshal and the senior flight cadet of the squadron at the passing out parade. The picture on the left I treasured dearly. When I got to Cromwell, I was very surprised to find in the front row there was the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, and on the outside was the Trenchard, who was the founder and the man who fought with the survivor of the RAF in the 20s when they tried to shut it down. And on the left-hand side was a picture of General Smuts. When I got there, I didn't know why I was there. And when I left, I had no doubt at all why I was there, because in fact he was the architect who drew up the articles on which the RAF were formed. And he's held in absolute esteem by the Air Force, very much. Now, the picture on the right are the prize winners. Thanks to Karl, he's put a circle around me in case you didn't recognize me, and he's put a circle around the trophy that I won. And you'll see the guy in the middle is the John Lennon holding the Sword of Honor. Now, when John wrote his humble letter of apology, he said, you know, I didn't mind the Sword of Honor, but the prize I really, really wanted above all was the aerobatic trophy. And that's how we got the special is. Sorry, yes, Danny.
And the display.
Oh, you saw the display happened after the official lunch, after the week's parade. And being the winner of the trophy, it was my honor or task to fly not a solo, but let me fly solo, to fly an aerobatic display at the passing out parade. This was preceded by the Air Force, the college formation team, which was called the Lincolnshire Poachers. And they were a very fine team at that. And I sat down for lunch and looked out the window and thought, there's just no way that I'm going to fly today. And halfway through the lunch, the town I went, and my name was called, and I hastened my help down to the flight line. And a very irate squadron commander said, where the hell have you been? And I said, for what? He said, you're supposed to fly in 20 minutes. And I looked up at the sky, I looked at his face, and I thought, I did not say anything. And they put me in a jet provost, and since the competition, which was about 3 months before, I had not had the chance to do any practice. And they put me in the jet provost with a squadron leader who was a seconded Singapore Air Force. And I said, I'm terribly sorry, sir, I'm going to get this wrong. And I handed him a bit of paper with the sequence. I said, please read the sequence out, otherwise I'm going to end up in the wrong corner, the wrong altitude, in the wrong direction. And he proceeded to read it to me, and I proceeded. By the way, the formation team, they stopped their display because of the bad weather. And how they set me up in that weather, I can't even begin to tell you. So, my limit for the display was 1,000 feet, but the cloud base was 1,000 feet. And I kept waiting and hoping that somebody would say, you can't fly, but nobody did. So I then proceeded to fit my air display into the piece of airspace between the ground and 1,000 feet. And at one point, the poor guy sitting next to me got the sequence mixed up. And in a panic, I thought the only way to get out of this, if you know the term Derry turn, which was invented by a Battle of Britain pilot called John Derry, if you start a turn, the guy behind you will try and get inside your turn to shoot you down. So all he did was continue rolling. So when you rolled, the other guy was heading, looking for you over there, and you rolled and headed the other way. That was a Derry turn. You're supposed to do this in level flight before you pull around the back. And I started pulling when I was inverted. And I realized I'd cocked it up, and I didn't know how to fix it, so I just pulled harder and harder, and the Scotland leader next to me blacked out. And if you ask me what height we recovered at, I don't know. But everybody watching the display, anybody who knew about flying, just turned away and put his pictures in his ears. And all the other people who didn't know about flying said, wow, what a performance. So that was a very close show. Yeah.
You know, I heard an expression today by Jim Davis. He was talking about that unfortunate accident at down at George, and he said the weather today, it was like the inside of a cow, which sounds like this here as well.
Totally. Now, I don't know if you call it coincidence or there's a French word for it, I can't remember. But the airfield in Cape Town, before the new one, DFR, was Wingfield. And these two little guys sitting in the go-kart and me with a circle around me, their father was the station commander, and we were all at the same morning school, so we used to go home to his station commander's house at the weekends. And this picture was taken of us. And the following day, with my little brownie box camera, DC-4 arrived, so I took a picture of it. 40 years later, that was BMH. 40 years later, I got the fire airplane. If that isn't coincidence, I don't know what is. And it wasn't until I dug up, this was a scan of that print, and I could not read the registration. Only after digging for a couple of days into a shoebox full of photographs, I got the original contact printout, and with the magnifying glass on the tail is BMH. And thereby hangs the tail. Just go back one slide. Okay. That's a photograph of my father after the war, and what the SAF at the time called their undress uniform. I don't know why that should be called an undress uniform, but it was a very formal parade type uniform. When I turned 16, in Rhodesia you could get a driving license. So I looked forward to a driving license. And my father said, this little shit's not going to drive my lady. So he went out and he bought this little Morris Roadster, 1934 Morris Roadster. Well, this was only 15 years after this motor car was built, so it was pre-history in my little world. But he drove it home and he said to me, you want to drive? You have to fix this motor car, which took me a year. I had to take it apart at the seams. He took the engine to the engine shop at New Serum, and the Air Force kindly reconditioned the engine and put it back together. And there's the finished product, father and son, and dog. When it came time to leave home, my father realized that there was no way on earth that my mother was going to drive this wreck that I treasured so dearly. But just quickly to take another photograph, they're just family pictures of family at Weinberg Camp in the 1950s, family again at the bottom, which Karl put in, and there's me and my sister in Salisbury at about 1959.
Your grandfather with the
My grandfather, by the way, I suppose you could say that I was kind of born with a military silver spoon in my mouth, because my grandfather was General Brink, who took the South African Army into Abyssinia in World War I. And when we grew up as children, he was a delightful grandfather, and we knew little about his military past and much about how he looked after us. But to go back to the other one, my father went to an agricultural show in Salisbury, and Pavel Beta had got the same model car, but a sedan version, and he had done a superb restoration in half the car, and the other half was dented and bent and buggered. And my father said to him, very smart, what are you going to do with this thing? He said, well, I'll just throw it away. It's only an advert. He said, well, how much do you want to finish the job? You've done the first half, I'm not paying for that, you can't do it. So he did a magnificent job, and so when I left home at school, The little roadster went the hard way, and my mother took over the little car on the left-hand side. My father's favourite aeroplane in World War II was the Ventura. So here is a picture of him. I think he was about 89 then, and I took him to Swartwood to stand and to look at his old Ventura, and he was part of the buying commission that went to England in the 1950s to order the Shackletons for the SAF. And he wrote a very interesting little biography when he was about my age now. And unlike him, I have a terrible memory. He had total recall. So he wrote his little book about his whole life as though it happened yesterday. And when this SAF contingent arrived at Avro, they went to the Coastal Command squadrons first, and they said, what would be your dream Shackleton? And there was a burst of wish lists from the RAF, which my father wrote down. He went to Avro and he said, can you build a Shackleton like that? They said, sure. So they were built for the SAF and then ordered by the RAF, as it were. This is a Mark II Shackleton. If you can see on the nose, there's an Arab kunja, which is the Arab dagger. But it's taken in Nairobi. In the background, you'll see some Britannias lined up. And their job was to fly fuel down to Zambia for the Javelin squadron that was based there during UDI. And on the next slide, you'll see my father wistfully looking at the Shackleton.
You want the 38 on the Shackleton?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Can you see a 38 on the fuselage up there?
Yeah.
Okay, this airplane appeared in Pravda with a very irate comment by the communists who said, here is an RAF B-38 harassing one of our innocent trawlers. And there's the old man wistfully looking at his... He left the SAF just as the Shackletons were arriving, and I'm not going to go into the sad story behind that. Yeah. Okay, when he turned 80, I put him on a jumper with me and I flew him to Hong Kong. So there you see a picture of my father when he was 80. Pretty sprightly looking guy. If I look like that when I'm 80, I think I'll be doing well. And on the next picture next to him is on his 90th birthday. Well, you can see that the years are starting to tell, and he's sort of getting a bit afraid of the ages there. And Carl wanted to put this in. I'm going to come to some of the characters of my life. My mother came down to visit, and Ricardo had this Oster. So I took her flying in the Oster. We're coming to the DC-6, was a bit out of sequence, and I'm not surprised because I sat down with Carl with a million photographs, and how we cobbled this together is still a total mystery for me. The DC-6 belonged to Chris Skitter in Benton. And the first trip I did of the DC-6 was with Laurie Roth. And the DC-6, Laurie was supposed to do my training in the DC-6 in Benton. And I was flying at DC-3 up the Namibian coast, and we changed crews. I came up to Windhoek, and Laurie and I sat in terrible weather for about 3 or 4 days, and the flying was not going to be possible, so we had to abandon the project. Here we have, you've probably got a better picture of me. There's my good lady wife and I, who did some magnificent flights. She flew on the DC-6. I got off in Nairobi because I had to come home, and she and the crew and Laurie went up to Addis Ababa, and I think we had to have Laurie here to tell us about it. And there is Laurie, this is at Lanseria. This is the crew that Laurie led up all the way. And when we got to Livingston, I don't know if we have some pictures of that wing flutter. No. Okay. This jumps a bit out of sequence now, because the following year, they organized a DC-6 flight from Cape Town to Casablanca. Now, before we get here, what happened after Laurie and I couldn't fly, the aircraft came to Swartwood, and Fippy did my DC-6 rating in a DC-6 doing circuits and bumps at Swartwood. and it's a bit like flying a DC-3 on Kruger's law. It's very, very fragrant. And the law said I had to do 3 takeoffs and landings, which I did by the skin of my teeth. And you know, it's not called the ground rises as you fly north. So the ground rose at about the same rate as the airplane was climbing. And because I had to be instructor rated as well, on the way to land at Johannesburg, I had to do stalling. I won't say where over Joburg because it would be very kosher. And he landed, got off the airplane and said, okay, take this aircraft to Makuti, which I duly did. And I still really didn't know how to fly it until, as we come to the next phase, on the Cape Town to Casablanca, the guy flying with me was a guy called Julian Firth, who flew DC-6s for a freighter company in England. And he became the chief instructor, was one of the first one of Chris Cutter's aircraft went to Red Bull, and he was their chief instructor. And Julian Firth, on the trip to Casablanca, taught me how to fly a DC-6, and thank God, because the things happened which will subsequently be revealed, which I said to Julian, I might be in command of the airplane, but you're actually going to make the decisions. Okay, it's also a little bit out of sequence. The one on the left is us in Casablanca, there's myself and Charmaine, and the other one is in fact Nairobi, with Laurie Roth taking that in. I got off here. Laurie, I think it was the German guy got on board.
Klaus Plaza.
Who?
Klaus Plaza.
That's right, Klaus Plaza got on with you and went up to Addis. And I got off, and this is just the crew change process going on there. If you don't know what the inside of DC-6 looks like, it's a DC-4 on steroids. You can see it's got a complex cockpit. It's got a big flight engineer who, I'd rather not go too deeply into the flight engineer on the Chris Cutter's DC-6 because he was a maverick of note. But maybe I say nothing. This is the flight engineer's position and seating, and there you can see a view of the cockpit with a radio rack on the left-hand side. And the upper panel. The DC-6 had the double WASP engine. The double WASP engine powered the P-47 Thunderbolt. It powered the Ventura, and in this state it was in here, it was with automethanol, it was 2,500 horsepower, which meant on that wing, on that aircraft, you had 10,000 horsepower on takeoff, which I can tell you is more awesome than a 747. That's the picture you see from the office when you're in flight. It's even more spectacular. This is an Eros at sundown. Okay, we set course for Casablanca, when we flew to Luanda, and then we flew to Libreville, where we had to pick up enough fuel to fly from Libreville up to northern Cameroon near Lake Chad, and then back down to Accra. So that airplane was full up to the gunwales. Now we come to an interesting side of this flight engineer. To do a wet takeoff at a DC-6, you have to have the auto feather working. Part of the lessons I was getting from Julian Firth, we went to the airplane and he showed me how you could check the auto feather system when the engine's not even running. And we discovered in Libreville, this fragrant takeoff about to happen the next day, that 2 of the auto feather systems are not working. So we looked at each other and we thought, okay, we are sitting in the haunted dilemma. I said, Julian, if we cry foul now, we can't fly. With your experience, if you are happy that we do the takeoff, and if we lose an engine, you will feather it before that flight engineer can wipe the shit out of his eyes, we'll go. So we agreed we'd go. Now, I don't know how clear that picture is up there, but I would guess our altitude here is probably between 50 and 100 feet, roughly. If you look right on the horizon, you'll see the runway. It's about 3 or 4 miles away. So on takeoff, with water breath, by 4 miles we'd reach 100 feet. Gear up, perhaps up. So I didn't have the heart to carry on thundering across Libreville at 100 feet. So I eased the airplane out to sea, which is on the left-hand side, and we flew up to Vaasa. Sorry, up to Maroa, which is the airfield near Vaasa. From Vaasa, we flew to Accra. Is Takoradi in this slow somewhere?
Yeah.
Is it?
I've got it here.
Okay.
You gave me to Cameroon, Takoradi,
Yeah.
Accra.
From Cameroon, we went to Accra. The passengers got off at Accra. They went by road to Takoradi. Now, if you have any World War II background, you'll know that Takoradi was the main staging place for aircraft flying the Atlantic to get to the Western Desert. To my absolute amazement, Takoradi looked like a film set. I thought that they were just about to make a World War II movie there. It was absolutely impeccable. I didn't see any airplanes, but the airfield was absolutely impeccable. So there again, we had to take enough fuel to get out of Takoradi to fly back to Accra, and not time to refuel there to go to Yamoussoukro. Here the flight engineer got in his copybook again because we had to carry a huge amount of oil. Radial engines, if you've heard the term oil-burning, petrol-cooled engines, that's what radial engines are. They consume prodigious amounts of oil. So in the belly, the cargo belly, we had a huge oil tank, and the flight engineer, with an electric oil pump, would transfer the oil to the wing locker tanks for the oil. And because he was a man of a few words and said nothing to anybody if he could help it, he started transferring the oil, didn't tell anybody, and forgot to turn the pump off, and he just pumped all the oil overboard. So we landed at Yamoussoukro with the airplane a golden colour of clean, fresh oil. But now we had a problem, we had to get oil. So dropped the passengers and we flew down to Abidjan, picked oil up, came back, got back after midnight. The airfield was closed, no transport. I won't bore you with the expletives that flew around the place. And after a bit of arm twisting, we then flew out of Ivory Coast to Mali, where we landed on the river at Mopti. This was an eco tour, so the passengers were doing all the tricks. When we landed at Libreville, half of them went into equatorial Africa to look at pygmies, and the other half went to a small island north of Sao Tome. So they were heading for all the really exotic parts of Africa while we were their bus taking them around. So we got to Mopti, and they did whatever they did there. There's some very exotic places to see in Mali, and then we flew to Timbuktu. Now, Karl knows a lovely ditty about Timbuktu, and when there's suitable company and a lot of beer, he can sing it for you. About the never one.
It was when Tim and I went down to Kent. There we met 3 ladies in a tent. Since they were 3 and we were 2,
so we got airborne out of Timbuktu, heading for Marrakesh. And Marrakesh is north of the Atlas Mountains. And this taciturn flight engineer, about half an hour in the cruise, taps me on the shoulder, doesn't say anything, and he points at the oil quantity gauge of number 2 engine. It says 0. I said, okay, I'm not going to shut the engine down on the gauge. So we throttled the engine back, let it cool down, and sure as shit, the compressor light came on, and looking out the window, that's what happened. Now, it won't fire on 3 engines at 15,000 feet, So it drifted down to about 8,000 feet. Now, if you look at any self-respecting checklist, it will say land at the nearest suitable airport. In West Africa, there are no suitable airports. So, with consultation to this fantastic area that Julian Firth, we decided we would hop past all the unsuitable airports, and if we lost a second engine, we'd simply divert land at the nearest suitable airport. And we realized that we wouldn't get across the Atlas Mountains. So the view you see there is a photograph I took sitting in the seat facing backwards in what would be first class in that airplane, on a satellite phone to Flippy, because we had no HF radio. I said, Flippy, we've got a problem. What, Houston? Was it Houston? We've got a problem. Please tell Casablanca we're going to land at Agadir, which is on the coast south of the Atlas Mountains. And in the next 4 hours, this airplane, the temperatures were ice at plus 30, so there were no graphs to even start to tell us what the performance capability was. And in the end, we drifted up to about 11,000 feet, which was way below the safety height to cross the mountains. And I spent half an hour on the radio talking to Casablanca, and in the end, they reluctantly said, you cross the mountains, own terrain clearance, own responsibility, and they washed their hands of us. So here we are crossing Atlas Mountains on 3 engines. The passengers thought the view was fantastic. And we were a little flagrant about it. Yes, sir. The number 7 cylinder, which is basically at the 4 o'clock position, the exhaust valve head had snapped off and had beaten the piston head to shreds. So you see the piston head was beaten to shreds and the inside of the cylinder head was also panel beaten. But being a lower cylinder, the oil leaked out. If it had been in the top cylinder, we wouldn't have even known. Because while I was watching it after waiting for it to hit 0 oil pressure, I could not even see a flicker on that engine. I would have thought with that damage, it would be starting to get a bit of a shakes, but there wasn't a flicker. Then the next one is arriving at... Okay, what we did was land at Marrakesh. At Casablanca, the only feature worth anything in Casablanca is the biggest mosque I've ever seen in my life. It is humongous. Otherwise, it's a slum town, not worth a picture of the proverbial. But Marrakesh, if ever you need a town on your bucket list, you have to put Marrakesh on it.
Now, Fluff taking the airplane back.
Okay, when we got there, Laurie, help me with the guy's name again? Klaus. Klaus and Fluffy McCurcher were supposed to take over the airplane and we didn't come home. But there's no way that EAA could get Fluffy McCurcher to Casablanca. Klaus flew down from Europe, and I then moved to the right-hand seat. Klaus took command, and we flew back. I said, Klaus, it's simple, just follow the oil, there's a streak of oil. Just follow the oil streak. And we went back to Accra. Fluffy got on board, and you must get Fluffy into this seat to tell you about his travails on the way back, because they were humongous. Okay. Okay. Are we running out of time?
No.
Okay. My first posting was to Aden. Now, that was in 1966. In 1965, the terrorist war started up there, so I arrived in the thick of this war, and I think 1964, if Jeff Earl can help me, or the war in this country started in about 64, 65. Later. It went on for 20 years. So we arrived in Aden, and Aden was a very strange place. There was a big air base there and a big army base. And these two shots, I climbed, there's a mountain, if you look on the Dar Harbour on the left, there's a mountain on the left of that, which is called Shamsan. And Shamsan was an extinct volcano that had broken into the sea on the eastern side. So you could actually get into the crater along the coast, otherwise you had to go across a pass. And it was a delightful legend, which is why I climbed the mountain, that if you climb Sham Sand, you never have to come back to Aden. So I flew the Argosy in Aden.
Just the top of the mountain. Eh?
Yeah, that's the top of the mountain. And the picture taken was me standing at the top taking the picture. And there in the foreground, Aden was a bit like the Cape Peninsula in reverse. If you can imagine Table Bay being on the other side and False Bay being, that's what Aden was like. And the airbase straddled the isthmus across there. Yeah.
Well, that's
Which is what?
okay.
Okay.
Just show point it down.
Okay. Now, the main task in Aden with the Argosy squadron was to fly into Africa. We used to fly down to Nairobi, we'd fly down to Madagascar, where the Shackleford's were based, we'd fly down to Swaziland, where they had an Irish regiment trying to stop the natives being too restless. And we basically flew around Africa and the whole of the Middle East up to Bahrain, and the second year I was there was the 6-day war. So we found ourselves in the thick of this tumultuous operation where the Israelis performed miracles. And sitting in Aden, all we could see was Cairo radio. Day 1, we're winning. Day 2, we're winning. Day 3, day 4, we're winning, we're winning. Day 5, we're thinking about it. Day 6, well, we're not winning. And day 7, they said it's game over. And then the locals went absolutely berserk and they tore the place to shreds. But up country, in an area called the Radfan, what looks like a tar runway there, in fact, is old motor car oil put on the sand to make it compacted. And I went up there in a Beverly one day just to go and have a look at the place, and while I was there, the last remaining DC-3 in the RAF was taking off to head south. A week after I did this flight, because it was only oil-covered sand, in the dead of night, some of the local yokels got in and put landmines under the sand, and the next Beverly to go through there had its undercarriage blown off, which was very embarrassing, but that's what happened. One of the places we went to, as I said in the beginning, when you saw the picture of the varsity, was at Salalah. Now, you will know that the Saltmill Muscat just died. 54 years ago, that young guy in a kind of palace coup took over from his father, who was a dreadful medieval ogre who lived only in Salalah, and he had these Arab troops. You can see one of them there had a normal British military rifle, and the guy on the right-hand side still had a Martini rifle, heavily inlaid with silver, which was obviously his own handiwork. At the end of Aden, the decision had come to pull out of Aden. We flew a reverse Berlin airlift. Instead of bringing supplies into Aden, we flew empty airplanes into Aden, but we couldn't get fuel, so we had to fly in with maximum fuel to fly everything out. And one evening, a Britannia landed. We had to land on the sea because there was a town on the other side where you'd be shot at. We landed with a tailwind, took reverse thrust, got forward thrust. Took reverse thrust again, got forward thrust. And in the dark, ran off the runway into the mud flats. And there you see a very forlorn Britannia lying in the mud. You see the props were bent double because a Proteus engine was a free turbine. Now, the Air Force was hugely embarrassed. They, rather like Dreyfus in the French army in the 1890s, they dragged this poor guy out and drummed him out of the Brownies, and they were sent to Macrahanish, which is an airfield in hell, as Officer RC bicycle stores. And then an inquiry started, and Bristol, who made the Britannia, pulled a file out of the archives and said to the RAF, when we gave you these airplanes, we pointed out to you there was a flaw in the system. which was 101 to 1 chance of happening, but to fix it was going to cost 10 years and £10 million, and you said we'll take their plan as a cap. He said that floor came to the surface in April. So there was a huge amount of embarrassment. They got the poor guy out of bicycle stores in McGrahan's, they brought him back on parade, put his sword back together, put his necklace back on his shoulders, and he was reinstated as a captain on Britannia's. Now, I went down there, then they had to cut the tail off because it stuck up into the flood path. When I was down there on an Argosy retrieval operation, I could see a huge amount of activity going on between the dugout and the airplane, which was festooned in plastic explosives. So I climbed up on the tail of the Beverly that you saw taking off out of Haviland. And I waited, and I saw little men running around. They'd all run back to the Britannia, and they'd all run back and jump in the trench, and they'd jump out and run. And after about an hour of this, I thought, oh, I'm going to go home. And suddenly, luckily I had my camera in my hand. Remember, the aircraft was full of fuel to fly back. There was a big loud bang. And there in front of my eyes, the Britannia disappeared in a big ball of fire. The other shot I took up Madeira Island is up in the northern part of the Arabian coast, and on ultra low tide, a skeleton of what we figured out was a boat fighter that ditched here during World War II. And I think I only saw that site in the 3 years I was there only twice. So it was the water was not normally clear. On this particular low tide, we were able to see it. Okay, these are general shots from the very first flights I did as an observer. The top was Aden, Comaxa airfield, with on bomb trolleys they had all drums of water turned into position because the local yokels took to mortaring the airfield, which if they had hit an airplane would have been very uncomfortable. So they had these blast fences around. And down on the bottom picture, you'll see an aircraft taking off on a dirt strip. That was a forward army base really close up to the Yemen border. In fact, if you follow that valley, the hills in the foreground is actually Yemen. And the Beverly was just taking off there, and then we were dropping fuel supplies to them out the back of the Argosy. The next shot is a trifle out of sequence. That was taken, we never landed there. A, it was too short, and it was certainly not Argosy material. But the other one was a Beverly. The Beverly's been everywhere. In fact, they were known, the nickname for Beverly was a million rivets of loose formation. Another upcountry strip where I was lucky enough to be on board with the first Argosy to go into Behan. There's a shot of an Argosy training at Aden. You can see the number 2 engines feathered. So they obviously, and by the way, they did manage to put an Argosy into the water there. They ditched it. And for reasons unknown, they already decided to pull it. They did more damage pulling it out of the water. They shipped it back to England, and the factory rebuilt it. And I was privileged enough to be on the crew to go and fetch XB413 that had been ditched in the water at Aden. Came out of the factory brand new. Okay, this is just happy snap shots of me in Sharjah. That shot of me taken by a captain who we'll talk about it later. You can't see it, but I had an SAA Flying Springbok on my cap, little ever realizing that I was heading for SAA anyway. Now this is Flying Officer Stableford in the right-hand seat of an Argosy.
The name of that, the nickname of the airplane.
Oh, you can see that the aircraft has a very close resemblance to a mammary with a nipple. So it was fondly known as the whistling tit. Yeah. Okay, that's a shot of me in my desert gear, and also obviously also in Sharjah. This also got picked out of it. This is an interesting picture. Along the coast, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Wadi Hadramaut. It's famous because over the centuries, families just built, every time a new generation, they built another floor on top of the house. And in the Wadi Hadramaut, in Shabam and Sayun, of 5-story mud buildings, just mud. The airfield in McCullough, which is a very ancient port, is called Leanne. And here we are with the Beverly and the Argosy actually picking up everything that was portable RAF and flying it back to Aden as part of the withdrawal. Here. We had a daily run up the coast called the RSM, which is Rian, Salalah, Maseira, and we'd end up in Maseira for a night stop. And we landed there, and we were just about to go to the bar, and the tunnel went and said we had to go back to Salalah. There'd been an ambush in the mountains, and an army patrol was shot up. So we flew back after dark, and it was a monsoon time, so there was low cloud and rain. I was brand new on the squadron, and the Argosy was a very tall cockpit, as you see, a bit like a jumbo, because it had a freight bay underneath. You could fit a Saracen armoured car into the back of the thing. And we were doing an ACR-7, which is a non-precision radar approach. And I turned my windscreen wiper on, and the windscreen wiper was working away, and I could see the runway lights. And I looked across, and the captain's windscreen wiper was not working, wasn't turned on. And he was busy doing what you do on a radar approach. So I looked and I nudged the flight engineer, the windscreen wiper controls was on the combing next to you. So all the engineer had to do was lean across and turn the captain's windscreen wipers on. Now he didn't have windscreen wipers, he didn't need them. And his fists were like claws clasping the armrests which had folded up. And I said to him, turn on the captain's windscreen wiper. And I could just see this guy was frozen because he thought this was not a good place to be. And being rugged stupid, I thought, well, what else can I do? And the captain also didn't put the ducks in a row because he landed just short of the runway threshold in the mud. I think he stopped in the length of this horn. And we had to go to take more power to get the aircraft out of the mud to go back. And we picked up the casualties, and you can see the bottom there, they had half a dozen stretchers rigged up. And I took this picture in awe, because it was my very first sight of battle casualties. And there were 6 guys there, and I think 3 of them didn't make it back to Aden, so that was very sad. This is the trip that we did to Behan, which is the first Argosy to go in there. And here is the inevitable advertising warning saying this is Behan Airport, and you can see the mud huts around the place. There's a bunch of army officers there and the crew standing around in the khaki drill. The guy with his chin in his hand was the squadron commander who was an amazing guy. He was a test pilot at Boscombe Down in the 50s. And after the life of me, can't remember, but the British produced some incredibly fast airplanes in the 50s, and then it fizzled out. He flew all those aircraft, and he got an AFC, which is a decoration that's not done in battle, for doing the spinning trials on the Hawker Hunter. So he must have had very big gonads to do that. Eddie Rigg was born the same day as Queen Elizabeth, in 1926. I was at Thorney Island with him, and I flew with him on his birthday. He was 40. To show how time flies, he is now 94. And I'm sadly, like all guys at 94, you run that risk of losing your marbles. Say the lights are now on, but nobody's home. Very sadly. Because Charmaine met him when we went across in 2014 for the Cranmore reunion, 50th reunion. And he was quite a character. Amazing guy. And the others are just pictures there. Sorry, next slide. I'm jumping the gun a bit here. That black and white was the official, that was done by the official RAF photographer who also did the official picture of the first Argosy landing, me and the squadron commander at Behan. Okay, so. This is a classic picture of the kind of low-level formation flying we did around the desert. By the way, people were very worried that the sand would do serious corrosion in the engines. And Rolls-Royce said when the Argosies came back from Aden and they stripped the engines down, they said they thought somebody had been in there with a can of brass. So everything shone. Nothing was corroded, but everything was bright, shiny inside. And there's my transport I had in Aden, fold-up bicycle. Now, we left Aden in 97. Sorry. In 1967, the Brits pulled out of Aden and left it. South Yemen then joined North Yemen, which were the reason they were fighting the war, and they probably had a civil war. And here you see what was left of Kormatra, about a dozen MiG-15s with their engines taken out, the hangars are in disrepair, and I only went to Grootfontein long after the war ended here, and Grootfontein is a bit like this. I never saw it in its heyday. So this was taken from the DC-4, which we will talk about a little later. So when we said to the passengers, we've got a technical problem, but we think it's not a good idea to go there, they're very happy to say yes, not wishing to fly aeroplanes that weren't happy at all. Okay, Karl wanted me to tell you about this. This is in Nairobi. To me, it was an absolutely mad cap skiing. You'll see on the nose of the C-130 on two arms folded back. It was a search and rescue device where on a search and rescue they would fold the arms forward at about a 45-degree angle, making a 90-degree scoop. And the guy needing rescuing was given a rope and a hydrogen balloon, which he would then send up. And the C-130 would pick up the rope and it would catch in that little clasp in the middle there. And the rope was suitably elastic, and this guy would then be yanked off the earth, whatever G was going to be able to stand. And then he would trail behind, and they'd lower the back door and send out a hook, pull him into the airplane. I'm not sure they ever, I think they might have tried it once or twice, but I'd hate to keep the receiving end of that. And the other one, it looks like I'm holding up the airplane. The Argosy actually was equipped to do blind landings. Although, like the Jumbo, was never cleared until Mickey Mitchell got our system cleared. But underneath the radar, in my hand, there's a small probe. Because it's all very well landing in Cat 3C conditions, but when you're on the ground, you can see nothing at all. So the idea in those days, they were going to put a magnetic cable in the taxiway, and all you had to do, that probe, pick up the cable, and it would manifest itself on the ILS. As long as you kept the localizer in the middle, you were in the middle of the taxiway. Oops, yeah. When I got to Bahrain, I heard that there was a mad, and I mean mad, army major who was in the army because it enabled him to go around the world and do what he wanted to do, and he was collecting boats for a maritime museum. And he got the Kuwaiti government to donate the dhow you see down below. Unfortunately, the Six-Day War closed the Suez Canal, and we were hoping it was going to open, it never did. And like the good, as I said earlier, the Air Force would sponsor anything, so they provided the personnel, including an RAF navigator. When the expedition had to be cancelled because it wasn't going to happen, the Air Force withdrew all the personnel. By then, my squadron had been disbanded, and I was left behind because I was taking part in this expedition. So the RAF navigator handed me the sextant and said, "Good luck." I finally learned how to use a sextant subsequently, but that comes later. Okay. Okay, the other one was just me in an Arab Banoose, which is nearly over there.
Just go.
Yes.
Let's just go back to that. And you told us about taking the down when the engine was taken out.
Okay, sorry. You're quite right, Carl, sorry. The dhow was actually based at Bahrain. This guy went to Kuwait, said, "Please, can I have a dhow?" They said, "Go back to Bahrain we were sent an agent with you, and you could choose it now, and we'll pay for it. No doubt the Kuwaitis were very wealthy, and it was peanuts to them. The engine was the length of the row of seats. 6-cylinder Burgess Kelvin engine, but it was buggered. So we pulled the engine out, and because the Argosies were flying up to Kuwait, I put it in the back of an Argosy and I flew it up to Kuwait, where I met with the Arab delegation and explained the predicament. And I could see from the glazed look in their eyes that they actually were interested. They said, yeah, we'll do it fine, no problem at all, it'll probably take 3 years. So I left the engine there, and we came back and filled up the bottom of the dhow with rocks, because it has to have ballast, and it was a very heavy engine that needed ballast to replace it. So in the end, the Mad Army Major decided he would just take the dhow for sale. Those of you who haven't met, Northern Hemisphere met, there's a wind that blows down the Gulf called the Shamsan. So we sailed out of harbour this gale force Shamsan, and only after about a day we realized that we were going to hit Sharjah before the wind stopped. And we were sailing in the busiest oil tanker lanes in the world. So it was very fragrant. Luckily for us, the wind died down and then went into reverse, and we then thundered back into Bahrain down harbour without an engine. And how do you stop the dhow without an engine? So I walked up the front there with a big knife and cut the ropes holding the anchor. And when the guy shouted, drop anchor, I cut the ropes, and the anchor went overboard, and this dhow went round and round the anchor for a while, and eventually stopped. And that was the end of the expedition.
Picture.
Okay, this was given to me in it's a watercolour, and it's a superb. The mountain in the background is Shamsan, and it was a kind of a, anybody who does art will realise it's just a filler. But it is a particularly nice picture of the Argosy flying over Aden. The other one was just before we got really badly fall down drunk. We took off out of Salalah one day, an engine caught fire. Luckily it was still on the ground, the taxi back shut down, and without an engine we weren't going anywhere, so we went in the bar. But before that, I decided I'd go get myself a coconut, and there's me up the palm tree trying to get a coconut. And then we played, has anybody played light ice?
Yeah.
Well, we played light ice, and they were plying me with liquid condiments, and in the end, you're supposed to either up the quote the previous guy's bid or pay a penalty. And in the end, they used to pull my head up, and I would say, what am I supposed to say? And then I would say it, and then my head down dropped like on the counter. And the result of which I had a hangover for about 3 days from hell, which is one of the reasons why I don't drink anymore.
Right.
Okay, when I got back to UK, they decided to disband the Argosy, so the Transport Command OC of Thorney Island was disbanded, and the transition to command was done at Benson. I left the Middle East with a BCAT co-pilot rating, which is a VIP rating, and I was on the airplane that flew. There's a organisation, institution in England called the Imperial Defence College, which is senior military officers and senior civil service officers have a get-together and do a staff college course, and at the end of which they have a choice of Europe, Middle East, or Far East. And we got we drew the short straw and wound up in the Middle East, which meant that we flew the Argosy through Pakistan, India, into what still was East Pakistan before Bangladesh. We went as far as the Khyber Pass and through India, and when I got back I went to a command course, and on the way back we had to go through India, and I was flying because I was sent to England as a Rhodesian. I had a Rhodesian passport. And this caused a lot of raised eyebrows, but I got back to England, and another crew went to a communist country that had given Queen Elizabeth a very fine racehorse. And that crew went through passport, and the communists discovered that a lot of the crew passports still had student as occupation, and they made a noise about it, so the Air Force said all passports had to be brought up to date. And the warning bell started going off, and I knew that my Rhodesian passport was going to get caught in the mincer. And it was. So he said to me, you have to get a British passport. I said, I understand that, I don't mind, but I'm not surrendering my Rhodesian passport. And there was a deathly silence, and they said, fill the form in, and off it went, and I sat down, looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, if you comply, you will get a British passport and British nationality, and you'll be stuck here. A gentleman you might have heard of called Harold Wilson had already wreaked havoc. He was already arm wrestling with Ian Smith over UDI. So I decided, my passport arrived back. I was given a temporary British passport, only valid for 6 months. It did not say citizen of United Kingdom and colonies. It said British subject. And my Rhodesian passport was cancelled. So I sat down and I wrote a letter of resignation. It went to the spotter commander, who was a bit of a drip, and he saw his career exploding in a political row, so he quickly passed the letter on to the station commander, who was a man of a totally different caliber, who called me in the office and said, why are you resigning? And I explained to him. And then a strange thing happened. He started talking in the first person. He said, they can't do that to us. I said, us? How does me end up as us? So he said, leave it to me. So Julie went away, and a couple of days later he called me in again, and then using the first person, he said, they've got us by the short and curly. He said, I said, no. He said, you have to comply. I said, okay, sir, that I come back to my resignation. I won't comply, and I will resign, and I will go home. And he said, no, why don't you retire? I said, sir, I'm 26 years old. How do I retire? So he pulled Queen's regulations out, which is a tome about that thick, and he, knowing it was a session commander, he turned over the appropriate chapter, premature voluntary retirement. So I said, and now? He said, come back tomorrow. Came back the next day, and he written out 2 full-scrap pages of the biggest sob story you've ever read in your life, in my first person. I read it, gobsmacked. He said, sign here. He said, if you resign, the Air Force will kick you out in 24 hours. You'll be sitting on the pavement outside the station, front gate there with nowhere to hide. If you retire, then you must stay in the mess of my invitation. I said, that sounds like a model. Sure enough, a week later they came back approved. So he said, look, when do you want to retire? I just finished the command course. I was due to go to Bahrain on a 3-month attachment because the argosies were still there, and we used to go after 3 months. I said, I can't duck that commitment, and I still want to get some command time under my belt. So I went to Bahrain for 3 months. In fact, this morning I looked at my logbook, and I see today what I was doing 50 years ago in Bahrain. I was lucky enough, and I come back to the shot of the sextant you saw. I had on my crew in Bahrain an A-cat navigator. Now, A-cat navigators in the RAF are like rocking horse shit. You can count them in the fingers of one hand. They were mega master navigators. I said to him, man, you've got 3 months to teach me how to navigate, because when I leave the Air Force, I'm going to go and do CIVI exams, and one of the subjects in those days was astronavigation. That was so good that in a circuit, downwind at best was 4 minutes. From crosswind, downwind, he had 4 minutes, he'd do a sunshot downwind in the circuit. That's how good Matt was. Well, to cut a long story short, I always sat at the back on the flights with Matt, and by the time I finished, I could actually do a sunshot on a periscopic section in an Odyssey. So he actually produced miracles. So I got back to UK, and the stage was set. The last flight I did was a training flight. We flew down to Lisbon and Dakar to Ascension Island. Now, you might have heard of Ascension Island. It's a pile of volcanic ash with a runway in the middle of it. And in those days, it was run by Pan Am for the American Space Agency. We actually flew in the diplomatic bits and pieces for the lone and sole and lonely British diplomatic representative on the island. And on the way back, we landed in Accra, in Ghana. And this was about a month or two after Nkrumah had been booted out. And the place was in total shambles. We stayed in what was the Sheraton Hotel. But they had run it down so badly that Mr. Sheraton arrived one day, pulled all these badges off the wall, and took everything in the hotel that had anything Sheraton on it. He said, keep this dump where I am. So that was an eye-opener for me about what was going to happen to Africa, which was happening before our very eyes. And from there we flew to South Island, which I'd never heard of, and I landed in South Island and took one look around, and I thought, wow, if I never see this dump again, it'll be too soon. I spent the next 30 years, me and Karl, flying into South Island. Went back, I then left the Air Force and stayed on doing my British licenses and gliding. In fact, while I was out of the Air Force, I did my Silver Sea guiding qualification. And this is where it gets quite uncanny. On the 11th of September 1970, I got on an SAA 707. The registration was ZS-SAA. We're going to come to the next slide now. I arrived back here, I then walked into the DCA in those days, and I walked into the office of a good gentleman called Arthur Thomas, who's the father of Selwyn Thomas. And after some arm wrestling with him, I said, I've got a British comp. He said, you have a comp without instrument rating. I said, yes, I just didn't do the test because it's so expensive over there. He said, no, to have a comp with instrument rating, you have to write the new comp. Well, I arm wrestled with DCA until the closing day to enter the exam, and I entered it and I wrote it, and it was just as well. In February, I went for selection for SAA, and on that same selection board was my good friend, Jeff Fish. He went a totally different path. He landed with his bum in the butter. He's terminal leave in the RAF. We've been paid by the RAF. And then Jeff will tell you the story, and then SAA were paying him at the same time, so he was getting double pay, living on the fat of the land, and I was living on the bones of my arse. I went to the selection board, and afterwards I went to the manager, and I said, I got a letter saying, you have been found suitable for employment. I thought, wow. So I went to see them, and I said, does that mean I'm going to get a job? He said, yes. I said, when? Sometime next year. This was in February of 71. So in absolute despair, my only job I could get was crop spraying. And there you have my work as a crop sprayer, but between the selection board and the crop sprayer, I was so pissed off. In order to do freelance charter, I had bought an old, really wanked out Honda 90 extra delivery bike, and there I'm on it, and I was so pissed off. I got on that bike and I rode non-stop to Salisbury, which is a big mistake. I won't go down that road again. I got back, and when I got back to Pretoria Flying Club, they said, there's a guy looking for you. And I said, yes, and the guy said he wanted a job as a crop sprayer. I said, yeah, well, never done crop spraying. So he said he found a pony. Now I had an open rating in those days, and he pointed to that little thing with the shark's teeth. I said, go and fly it. Now, an empty Pawnee has a power-weight ratio to die for. When you fill it up with water, it takes 100 gallons, which in anybody's language is 1,000 pounds of payload. So I got in this thing and threw it around the sky, and I thought, wow, what a lovely toy. And when I did my first gobsprang ride, it was Jekyll and Hyde. The Hyde that I flew at Waterberg was the Jekyll, full of poison, and it didn't want to fly. And I was there for a week. I had to stay with the guy who rode the truck, who frightened me shitless every night when he drove home. And I had to take that airplane to Waterberg at the end of the week for some technical repair. And I said, I'm going to Waterberg, I'm going to land, I'm going to tell Frank van Rensburg he doesn't owe me a cent, that I can't do this job. I think he had a sixth sense, because he met me at the airplane, and he wouldn't stop talking. Not until he had handed me an insurance proposal. He said, I'm going to insure you at my expense, and whatever. And when he finished, he said, now, how are you getting on? I opened my mouth to tell him to stick his job. I didn't have the heart. So I did that job for another couple of months, and then SAA, out of the blue, called me up to go and fly Hawker Siddeley with John Withers, because all the new boys had to fly Hawker Siddeley. And then again, I sat in front of Mr. Brock, the manager, and I said, is that my intake back? Having told me it's next year. He said, yes. I said, when is it? He said, September. And my boss, in fact, had got his operator's license, bought an aeroplane, and I drove back to Petersburg Civil, and I went into his caravan. I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the Air Force wants me in 3 months' time. He said, don't mess with them. If they bark, you jump first and ask how high afterwards. So I ended my stock Gobsprang career, which is probably just well. But in case you don't know, Gobsprang is about as monotonous as bullfighting. It just becomes a routine in the end. The guy who took over that job from me rode the airplane off, coming home one night and beating the shit out of a drive-in cinema, and catching the undercarriage on one of those little poles with the speakers. Bang. He didn't kill himself, because the Pawnee is designed to break up and leave the cage to bounce away by itself. There's on the 1st of September, along with Jeff Fish, and we lived happily ever after. And Jeff won't remember this, and it's poignant for me is that on the 11th of September, 1971, Matt McKendrick, who was one of the finest lecturers, as Karl would vouch, said, we're going to the hangar today to look at an airplane. We're on a 707 course. And to the day, a year later, I walked on board ZSSA. Wow, this is déjà vu. And then when I finished the course, Guy Patterson put us on ZSSA because you had to go and do 3 takeoffs and landings, because otherwise we wouldn't rate you. Okay, so that began my airline career. Okay. Okay, these are a series of... Those who know me know that I would fly anything, anywhere, anytime. The little tiny airplane at the top left-hand side is a teeny 2, called a teeny 2 because each wing is about half the length of the row of seats. And the one on the top right is known as a breezy, for obvious reasons. It's a very, very windy airplane to sit in. And the only instrument, unless you look over the top to look at the engine instruments and the altimeter down there, is the airspeed indicator between your feet. It was called a Fender Merva because it belonged to the gentleman who started Grand Central and he wanted to sell it. So I flew it down to that airfield above Ferrer's Pass called, anybody know? No. It had a specific name that the EAA would tell you. And the Swindler told the boss of the Natal EAA took one look at it and he bought it. And flying it home, very sadly, he was flying low level down a road and he didn't see a telephone wire coming across the road. And it slammed into the control column, which slammed back, aircraft pitched up, cut him in half. End of breezy, end of the poor gentleman involved.
That aeroplane was actually called a Fundermerva.
Fundermerva. Yeah, that because of Nicky Finn. But it was a breezy by trade, by my name. The Steelman is interesting. As we'll come a bit later, on the J52, which Karl and I flew and loved dearly, Laurie Kay, one of my icons, was flying the Steelman. I was flying the JU, and Greg de Klerk was flying a DAC, which eventually belonged to Flippy. So Laurie said to me, "You found the Steelman?" I said, "No." He said, "Jump in." Took off, stalled downwind and land. He said, You're now rated on it still. The Spitfire was a scale model which had huge problems. It had COG problems, and in the end, what happened was that the radiator burst. Now, if it hadn't had the COG and tracking problems, I probably would have flown it, and the radiator would have burst on takeoff, and it would not have been happy. Then the little airplane on the right was a Comanche that I owned for a short while before I retired. I had this pipe dream that I was going to fly it around the world, because with the end of communism, the whole world was very friendly. In the meantime, there was a Russian operation flying cargo here, and I got to know the Russian crews very well, and the guy was going to handle all my flying across Russia on the way around the world. Subsequently, in the historic flight, which we had Flippy from Ireland to thank for, I got to fly everywhere that I would have flown in the Comanche, and when I retired, which is a story to come later on, I went to the Seychelles, and I thought it was no point in having a Comanche in South Africa while I was sitting in the Seychelles, so I sold it to Adrian Fisher. Sadly, and Karl will correct me, Adrian bought it for his son, who I think committed suicide.
No, that son is still alive. That's
Okay.
Vian.
Yeah.
And Vian is flying 7-4s for
Okay. And did he have another son?
the other son that hurt himself was Stephen.
Okay,
Stephen.
the politics got a bit blurred for me, sorry about that. I hope you can see better than I can, yeah?
How are you guys doing? Do you need a comfort break?
Yeah, I think maybe. Smoke break?
10 minutes.
We break? 10-minute break. Then I can look more closely at these pictures here. Oh, okay, there's Archie's magic machine. And there's Klaus's magic machine.
We'll finish after the yellow one.
Okay. All right. These are just pictures of airplanes that I flew, characters. There's Archie with his absolutely magic Cessna 195, which is still the love of my life in airplane language. And there's a lovely picture of Klaus and Trixie. And then at the bottom is Charmaine and I and Alf Mears in Berlin, where we flew in Berlin with the DC-4. The next one is a twin Comanche belonging to, that was Gordon's, yeah, Gordon bought a twin Comanche, but the twin Comanche was bigger than him, and I had to actually put that project to bed. This is my least successful landing. Very quickly, I'll just round this off. And way distant past, Jim Bester had a delightful little Swiss girl who flew a Baron called Hotel Whiskey Whiskey, which was called Hotel Double Scotch. And she had a burning ambition to become a flying instructor. And this airplane belonged to Jimmy Popham, and I put her in this airplane and started her instructor training. And I was at pains to point out to her that as an instructor, never to demonstrate an exercise that you were not absolutely certain that would go right, like a forced landing. And in the JT Cup, the way you did a forced landing, you turn the fuel off. And the airplane would lose power, and you would then do what you do with the engine failure, and restore the power, and then carry out forced landing. We landed at Tommy's Field, which is just north of Grand Central, and for reasons I never figured out, she leaned forward and pulled the fuel cock shut at about 200 feet, 300 feet. And before I could restore the fuel cock, the engine stopped and the prop stopped. And I took one look at the amount of airspace underneath me, and I thought, if I dive and I don't get the engine started, I've got nowhere to hide. So I better do a proper first landing. And this little road was ahead of me. I landed coming up the hill, and it had been raining, and just as we got to the end of the landing roll, it landed into mud. And it stopped in the mud, and the aircraft went up and up and up, and it hung in the vertical for what seemed like hours, and then fell over on its back. Now, one of the exercises I teach on a forced landing, the last thing you do before you hit the ground is open the hatch. If it jams shut, you're trapped. I thought, the Cub doesn't have a hatch, it has two flaps. It jammed shut. So we had to open the window, which normally would come down, and had to open it upwards. And we had to both crawl out under the wing, onto the wing and off. And then came a punchline which I defy you to beat. She said to me, there are easier ways of getting me on my back than this.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we'll be going on to the Catholic. Some of the people call me Captain. I like it, but it's not necessary. But they could call him Captain because he's too full of shit. I won't tell you where that comes from. Anyway, I've seen it in writing. The Delsey thing was sorted out, and they went up on this trip, and they went on a freebie cruise on Sunset Cruise. And being a freebie, the crew never stood back. And this was a cheapskate boat, and it capsized on the Zambezi. Yeah, and Charmaine lost her towel and her sunglasses, and her camera got drowned. But she didn't lose it. Anyway, when they got back, Brian opened it and dried it out, but it had died. And the next night was a night stop at Kasane. And during the night stop, Charmaine went outside for a smoke, as she tends to do, unfortunately, far too long. Anyway, who am I? And Brian followed her outside as a gentleman and said it was not on to allow a lady to go outside to smoke in the dark unaccompanied, especially in Botswana. So this went on for a little while, and one of the other hosties told Charmaine she thought Brian liked her. Funny, these women are so intuitive. They met up on the occasional flip on DC-3 and the JU-52 after that. And there was long trips over to Europe, which is coming up now. And look what we have now. That was 17 years ago, I think, 17 and a bit years ago. More.
96.
96. Okay, 24 years ago. Good heavens, I didn't even think you were 24 years old. All right, so we'll press on here with the, just briefly, that this is a Catalina that Flippy Vermeulen restored. And Brian was given a ride in this, well, you tell the story there. Okay, Brian.
It comes.
That's better.
Okay, Flippy came back from a DC-4 flight with a guy called Hamilton, and this Catalina had limped in several years before and literally collapsed and died in the corner at Rand, and Hamilton took one look at it and decided to buy it, and Flippy undertook the restoration. For reasons of politics I'm not going to go into now, the Catalina changed hands at the 11th hour, and a crew arrived to fly back to America. They weren't very familiar with the airspace around here, and I put my hand up and volunteered to be their guide dog. So I sat in the right-hand seat of the Catalina, keeping them out of trouble and keeping out of mischief. But the final trip before the aircraft departed was a formation flight with Harvards and a DC-3. And this picture on the right is the follow-up from that. aircraft got back. The guy who bought it was not a particularly nice guy, and Flippy will tell you more about that than I can, but it departed these shores. Is this mic behaving itself?
Yeah, right. There's something wrong. There's something wrong.
Yes.
About that.
That's it.
Okay. So that's the sequence of the Catalina. But the Catalina, Carl and I were discussing this now, in perspective. Carl and I, the JU-52 started off because SAA was asked by Airbus, who were trying to cozy up to the Air Force and to SAA, what constellation price SAA wanted. And the Spanish Air Force was selling their JU-52s. So the wise man in the airline said to them, we'd like a JU-52. And it arrived, and it was more of a flying club than anything else until it was certified. And then it had to start earning its keep. I think Carl got on board before I did. I know my very first flight on the J-52 was with Laurie Rath flying down the coast. The J-52 rides up and down the coast were the closest thing to hot heaven that I've ever been on. Towards the end, when the SAF were selling their radial engine airplanes, Flippy, I took the J-52 down to Margate, moved it in Flippy. And the SAA put a price tag on the ticket, which was ridiculous, so we didn't sell any seats. And naively, I decided to half the price of the tickets. Whereupon there was an instant runaway success, and the aircraft was full up. But the trouble was, when I got back to Johannesburg, I had to appear before the launch of the Admiralty and explain why I sold tickets for half price. And I realized I was out of my depth. Flippy had done the training on the J-52, and he was tied up with his drilling business. And I went to Flippy and said, look, you better come help. So Flippy arrived, and with a bit of arm wrestling, he called it his Buddha Mafia. They acquired the DC-3, BXF, and BMH the DC-4, and subsequently AUB. I was given the task, which is another dream come true. I'd never flown DC-3s. The year before, the apprentice school had rebuilt a Harvard to concourse to elegance condition. And I was one of the very first, having never flown a Harvard, to be trained on the Harvard, which is, I was 49 years old. The following year, I did my conversion onto the DC-3 with Tony Smith. In the meantime, Flippy and Laurie, which is a story to be told, if it hasn't been done by now, of their flight to Oshkosh. I think it is an epic flight which ranks as close as you can get to Charles Lindbergh flight across the Atlantic. The following year, Flippy began to realize the huge potential of this airplane, and he got into bed, is a funny term, but he got into bed with a German tour organizer who was a genius at doing tours. And we took the DC-4 to Europe the next year, and on board was myself and Bruce Margolius, and Charmaine was the hostie. Not to gild the lily too much, by the time we got to the end of the flight, we began to gel, if that's the word. And now, I'm not going to get into personal history, but I only got married when I was 35. And then again, about 3 years later, I married again. And both marriages lasted 1,000 days. So I thought, you know what, this is not working terribly well. So when Charmaine and I got together, I said, this is not going to happen again. And when I turned 70, I thought, it's time. And I blew the socks off everybody at the 70th birthday party, and I still didn't believe what they were hearing. So as a result, Charmaine and I got married. Whether we lived happily ever after, watch the space. That trip to Europe took us up to Kariba, it took us up to Nairobi, which is very run-of-the-mill stuff. We had to go via Djibouti. Now, I knew Djibouti from my Aden days, because at one stage the refinery in Aden had shut down, and we had to fly to Djibouti to pick fuel up to fly back to Aden. Djibouti is the kind of place that you want to avoid, if possible, at all costs. It has no redeeming features whatsoever. The other alternative was to go to Addis Ababa, which is something like 7,500 feet high, and the DC-4 doesn't fly at 7,500 feet. DC-6 will, because it's got automated injection. So we flew all the way to Europe, and Düsseldorf Airport, if you can remember that far back, it burnt down. So we couldn't land in Düsseldorf. So we landed at a small British Army base nearby called Mönchengladbach, about the size of Grand Central. Well, subsequently I found out that landing at DC-4 at Grand Central was no big shakes, but to land the DC-4 on that particular trip was not very clever. But that trip did take us to, if you have a bucket list, it took us to Luxor, it took us to Aqaba, and from there we went to Petra. Now, I'm sure you've seen the Petra scene in the James Bond movie with Sean Connery and what's his name? Harrison Ford galloping past the treasury. And believe me, Petra is serious bucket list stuff. From Petra, Bruce Margalius, who is of the tribe of Israel, did the ADC and I did the airplane. And how he got it right to this day, I don't know. But he came back and he said, we have clearance to fly over Israel. Because we had visions of having to fly down to the Suez Canal and up across, around the corner from hell. And we flew across Israel at 1,000 feet, and it just was a magic carpet tour of the Holy Land. From there we went up to Istanbul. Istanbul is another magic place. The only trouble was when I got there, I spent my time in Istanbul trying to find oil. Because by the time we got to Istanbul, we'd run out of oil. I told you the radial engines are oil burning, petrol cooled. So we're out of oil. So after a lot of, everybody else had a great time, I hope, and I had to find the oil, and then we flew across Albania, across the Adriatic, across the Swiss, the Austrian Alps at Innsbruck, and we landed at Mönchengladbach, and that was game over for us. Flippy and Laurie then took the airplane up to Berlin, where they took part in a prestigious air show. But it was the seeds of another adventure, because the historic flight was a whole cornucopia of adventures. Flippy flew the DC-4 to Heathrow, which was having its 50th birthday party. And when he was in Heathrow, and Laurie, you have to correct me if I'm getting this story wrong, Swissair came to talk, because the following year was the 50th anniversary of their first transatlantic crossing. And a delightful guy called Marcus Ritchie approached Flippy and said, how much will you charge to bring your airplane to Switzerland to fly to New York? And Flippy, being a consummate businessman on the back of the cigarette packet, wrote it out, held it up, and this guy freaked out. He said, utterly impossible, there's no way we could afford that. And Flippy said, you don't pay for the airplane, you get people to pay for the airplane. You fill it up with people in Joburg to Zurich. You fill it up with people in Geneva to New York and back again. And we did 2 of those New York crossings. On the screen in front of you is the aircraft, which was ZUILI. The actual registration of their airplane in 1947 was HBILI. And to give you an indication of how flexible the Swiss are, or were, the flight from Zurich to Geneva, where the flight was going to commence, for photographic purposes, they allowed us to put HBILI on that airplane, which by any stretch of the imagination is highly illegal. You can't just relabel an airplane. I suppose you can if you keep it in-house and you don't tell anybody. But it happened that way, and we also had a magic flight from Geneva to Shannon. For those of you who don't know, Shannon to Gander was the shortest sea crossing you could do at the end of World War II. So the DC-4s used to fly across the Atlantic from Shannon to Gander and Gander to Shannon. We got to Shannon and they were also having their 50th birthday party. And they put us up at a very posh hotel called the Dromoland Castle Hotel, and they put me in a tower that reminded me, if you remember that fairy story of Rapunzel, with down your golden hair. Well, I was in Rapunzel's tower, but there was no Rapunzel. We went about 4 days in Shannon. On the day of departure, I came down this very tight spiral stairway, and the lights on the last 4 steps had burnt out. So I stepped into a black hole, I fell, and I smashed my right shoulder into the rail. I was carrying 2 heavy suitcases, so I couldn't.
Yeah.
So I then went to the crew transport with the shoulder hanging down here. Not feeling very happy with myself, or feeling very sorry for myself, and I said, Flippy, what is the famous saying? Houston, we have a problem. They had one look at it, and I said, okay, just understand one thing. This date for this flight is critical. We're not short of death, we're not delaying the flight. They got me to the airplane and they hid me in a corner where I could feel sorry for myself. And eventually they said, we take me to the local doctor. Got to the local doctor, it was Sunday morning, he came down in his pajamas and in his delightful Irish accent said, we're taking you to the local hospital and putting you under anaesthetic. And I stood up and said, thank you doctor, goodbye. And I walked out. Because I walked out, they didn't have any further control, so they put me back on the aeroplane. And we took off, beautiful weather across Europe. We flew across Europe at 1,000 feet, across the beaches of Normandy, the Channel Islands. But coming in across the Atlantic, a double front from hell. We took off, and I have just the shadiest memory of looking out the front, looking over the side, and just putting the curtain closed. And Flippy realised that I wasn't going to survive 10 hours in that seat, so he and Marcus moved me to the back, and Marcus took my place in the front, and we duly landed at Gander with this war wound or cripple or whatever it was. And they took me to the local hospital, where, to cut a very long story short, the local orthopedic surgeon said he was going to put the ball back in the socket. But they put a little drip thing in my finger, in my arm here, and he said, if it gets bad, we'll put some vodka in there. So he started lifting my arm, and the pain went exponential. And I said, please stop. And there was a young nurse there, and I said, young lady, I think you better leave the room, because there's going to be language here that you don't want to hear. Well, it hit pain threshold -1, and the ball went clunk, and it was back together. And I said, oh, bye. We went to New York, stayed at the Waldorf Astoria, which even in those days was on its last legs. It was the absolute epitome of hotel accommodation. And Laurie will tell you this, he did the second transatlantic crossing. We flew back to Shannon, back to...
Just if you have a look here, they are over the World Trade Center in Manhattan.
Yeah, while we're still there. By the way, when we landed just ahead of a frontal system in New York. And because of a male reception that was specially laid on by Swiss Air, they pulled the airplane's nose into a hangar, and all hell broke loose. And for the next 2 hours, every flight was diverted from New York. If we'd got there 10 minutes later, we probably would have wound up in Boston or somewhere, and it would have been a disaster. We spent a magic week in New York, and then another load of passengers got on board, and we flew back to Gander. I remember Gander, this was end of May, which is a month sort of midsummer. the snowbanks, when I walked back from the hotel, from the hospital to the hotel, the snowbanks were at the height of my shoulder, and I thought, this is a hell of a place to live in. This was, operation went on for a long time. They went to the Mediterranean. The following year was the Berlin airlift celebration. You must have seen pictures of the candy bomber, that famous guy who dropped sweets for the children, flying on the approach into Gatow, past a row of buildings. That row of buildings is still there. And flying the DC-4 down the approach into Gatow, my blood still runs cold when I think about it. It just was the most iconic ever. The Berlin airlift was a great success. We did a lot of flying. One evening, was at the Four Seasons Hotel, commissioned the aeroplane to have dinner on board. We had to fly around Berlin for 2 hours while they served a five-course meal. They even had a violinist on board. I don't know why, because you could hear that kind of noise. And then it kind of ended where we flew up into Norway, into the Arctic Circle, because a whole lot of Germans wanted to go and have a party in the midnight sun. We landed, they were very clever. They disguised this airport with Russian, this was post-communist fallout, but they had Russian communist flags, and they had Murmansk, big board on the front called Murmansk. And they had guys dressed up in Russian army uniforms. So when we landed there, I was supposed to start a story on final approach that I'm terribly sorry we lost. We're landing at the nearest suitable airport. And when they landed, being the connotation of the Russian front, and they saw Murmansk on the airport terminal and a lot of Russian soldiers, I think they shot themselves in the back, but not for long. Okay, Carl, I think I've got that one. Just quickly, the historic flight was really the mastermind of Flippy. Flippy had an acumen and an ability to persuade an airline to do things with a historic flight which I don't think anybody else could have done, and nobody will attest to that. Everything went fine until a gentleman called Coleman Andrews arrived. And then it started to unravel. But Carl will do this up from there.
There's just a few pics there.
Okay. At the end of the Berlin, I was tasked to fly the DC-4 back through Aden, which I think we showed you pictures of earlier on. And in his wisdom, and I was very grateful for it, Flippy put on as my co-pilot Johan Press, who was the chief pilot of SAA. And if ever there was a non-intimidating man and an inspiring leader, it was Johan Press. And Johan Press played the part of the penultimate co-pilot. He did everything I said and never ever said anything against what I said. When we got to pick the airplane up, it was in Munich. It had been flying around Europe for 3 months, and it was very, very tired. The magnetos were shot to ribbons. And we had on board a SAA German manager, Paul Althoff. And when we landed in Berlin, I said to him, please phone Flippy and ask him to put 4 magnetos on tonight's Frankfurt flight, because we have to have them. And after his short conversation, Paul handed me the phone. I said, hello, Flippy. I said, I need the magnetos. No, says Flippy, you're going to go through Milan in about a week's time. I'll send them to Milan. You can do it there. And I got snake lips. And I don't often blow my fuse at Flippy. I said, Flippy, you have put the chief pilot of SAA on this airplane. And his job is to stop idiots like you and me making stupid decisions. And there was a deathly hush, and the phone went click. But the magnetos arrived the next day.
Just want to go back here because the person is present. There's Brian with his Bessemer converter at Ricardo's Bry, and he had a great horror of rotary wing type machines. But please just check out his Cheshire grin, and there is how he felt about the flight afterwards. Thank you, Eugene, for the pictures.
I have to tell you, I grew up convinced, mainly because of a small anecdote I'll tell you. My memory is not too good. The guy who got killed at the air display down in Glendale. I was sitting in Grand Central in the days when it was still a beautiful little aerodrome, watching a student going solo, and the young lady came to me and said, Glenn says, would you like on the ride of the chopper? And I looked round, and there was what I gathered was an R-22. I thought, well, why not? So I got in beside him and folded my arms and said, okay, this is right. He said, no, you fly it. I said, Glenn, I hadn't got a cooking clue how to fly a helicopter. He said, you're going to start now. It was like trying to balance a ping pong ball on a marble. Whatever I did, it went wrong. It was a bit like that first glider flight I did in the RAF. And after 20 minutes, I got out utterly humiliated. I thought, nobody can fly this plane. So I came away with a very jaundiced opinion of helicopters. I was convinced that you did not fly them, you had to fight them. I was convinced that if you let go of the controls, they crashed. Until I was privileged to meet up with Eugene Cousin, who took me in that Element 3, which is almost like a DC-3, it's a vintage helicopter. And suddenly, he taught me to fly a helicopter. Well, taught me is a very loose expression, but he allowed me to fiddle with it for a while, and at the end of which, you saw the result, a Cheshire Cat group.
JU-52 delivery to from Swappers.
Okay, when the historic flight got taken over by the new boys. I use the term loosely. And the guy appointed as the manager of the historic flight, which had, after Coleman Andrews, found refuge in the Transnet Heritage Foundation. And this guy rocked up at Swartkoop one day where we had refuge, and he started reading the riot act to Flippy about he was going to do this and he was going to do that, which was totally illegal, and Flippy kept saying to him, you can't do it, you can't do it. So he said to Flippy, you're fired, which really took the wind out of his sails. At the time, we were given 6 months to get our own AOC, which was a mammoth task, and was being done by Mickey Mitchell. So Mickey and I worked in an office together. He was the guiding light and I was the sorcerer's apprentice. And this guy who sort of remained nameless came and started telling Mickey what he was going to do. And Mickey, he said, you can't, you can't, you can't. And he came in the office one day and said to me, Mickey's got to go. I said, well, be that as it may, but Mickey and I work together, so he goes, I go. And the next day, he was summoned to this guy's office, totally unaware of what was coming, and the guy said to Mickey, you're fired. Mickey came back in the office, gobsmacked. He looked like a ghost. And I saw red. I was so angry. Then the secretary came down and said, the boss wants to see you. So I walked down that corridor, spitting blood. Walked in his office, said, you're fired. I said, beg your pardon? He said, you're fired. I said, I had no idea that you employed me. I don't work for you. But you can stick to a job, I'm leaving anyway. Both of us walked out. I took Mickey's out of the CAA, we said we're out of there, washed our hands and walked away. And the historic flight lived on being raped and pillaged as has happened to the country since, until it eventually shut down. The aircraft were taken back to ORT, or if it was in those days. But the JU-52 had a new undercarriage fitted. And it was still being certified, it was in a kind of a certification limbo. And Carl and I were given one-off special VFR to take the plane from Stockholm back to Germany. So we got airborne and we got as far as Karl Army and we ran into big shit. We had to turn back. Special VFR wasn't ever even going to be considered. So we turned back and we landed, and while we were there was a lull in the weather. The weather opened up, so we jumped back in and we rushed back. And I could see by Kyle Army the next wave of shit was coming in. And Carl was flying, I was on the right-hand seat doing the radio, and I said to Joe, look, we've got special VFR clearance, but I can't even see Santa. So a very friendly controller said, would you like radar vectors? I said, thank you very much. So we climbed into cloud on special VFR. And Tony, the guy in the back, Tony, the
King.
No. He was a
Okay.
Tony was on his phone at the back, onto 702, saying, if you listen outside, there's a J-52 flying overhead. And he was broadcasting this to the world. And CIA was saying, they're doing what? So eventually we cleared for an ILS approach. And we looked down, and the ILS instrument is missing. So I said, thank you, cleared for the ILS approach. So Carl had a rinky-dinky GPS. I said, Carl, you navigate us to Juliet Sierra, and we will maintain a GPS track of 035 or whatever the QDM was. And if we do that, and we come down at whatever magic rate of descent we figured out, we're going to make it. It was roaring with pain or pouring rain, and we broke down at about 500 feet. We landed in the rain, taxied in, shut down, and a week later, phone calls from the Christian. I said, you know what? I will go and bite the bullet. So I went in. It was a court martial. Luckily, the president of the court martial was an amazing guy who will turn up a bit later, called Arthur Downs. The prosecuting officer, for the want of putting it in military terms, was a guy called Jeff Kingsbury, who was going to make it his business to take out my gonads. So every time he started asking leading questions, Arthur Downs said to me, you don't have to answer that question. So I didn't. So this guy eventually got the message that this court martial was not going to hang me. So in the end they said, I did a logical explanation. I went there fully armed with a almost watertight case for the defense. So he paid me a huge compliment. He said, you go back to this sorry flight and you tell them that if they'd sent anybody else here today, they would have been hung. I said, thank you, sir. I left. And then I think Carl needs to tell you his side of the story because it's a double-edged sword.
Just briefly, when the airplane, half the instruments were gone, all of them were gone actually, and they cleared us to level 90, and we had a German bank. And when you can fly, you can fly. Anyway, we got radar vectors, and then with the GPS we got in there. I'll just tell you that Brian did my conversion on the DC-3. It was to Windhoek, Swakopmund, Makuti, and back. And the fact that we went to Swakopmund, we were there for about, I think 2 or 3 days, and then to Makuti. And we took our passengers back to Eros, or back to Windhoek, and then we set sail for Joburg. And now Brian was flying, and he said, there's a, I don't know what it was, what they called it in Rhodesia, a thunderstorm, a goodie or something like that. They said, we'll go through that one. We're mad. Anyway, we went through it. He said, what are you doing that for? He said, these buggers back at Joburg will never wash the salt off. We will. We got this thing in a bloody backswings. There were 3 of us on board this thing. I was sitting there going nigger ball, arm ball, and ripping the buttons off the upholstered seat. And when we broke out of this thing, I was so glad that we were alive. But there was another one over there, and we went through that one. We did that all the way back, and when we got back to Johannesburg, that aeroplane was shiny, shiny clean. Not my underwear. It was that aeroplane. Look, there's the family. Yes.
This was, unfortunately, I only found the photo too late. On the 70th birthday, because BX7 and I are the same age. I'm 9 months older than this, so I have seniority. So we were invited to take part in this 70th birthday flight. And there's some also happy family pictures next to that. Now, the picture coming up next, sorry, I'll keep looking at two pictures. In about 1981, because I had bought a house very close to Grand Central, I spent my life up there, and there was a SA navigator who had actually flown in Bomber Command during World War II, and he was moonlighting as a flying instructor, and I walked up and saw this globe shrift, which had always been a pipe dream of mine. And I was standing looking at it, and forgive me, I can't remember his name. He came up and said, "You like it?" I said, "Hell, this is a fantastic airplane." And he handed me the keys. So I climbed in and I got the flew. And when I came back, there was a short, wide-bodied little guy standing next to it. And his name is Graham Ross. And I said, "This is your airplane?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You're a lucky bugger." He said, "I don't think so." I said, "Why not?" He said, "I've had this aircraft for 3 months. I can find nobody to fly it." I said, "Get in." Long story short, I told him to fly it. When I met him, his son was about 6. I eventually told his son to fly it. And then I managed to persuade him to buy Laurie Kay's twin Comanche, and they lived happily ever after. Okay. I borrowed his globe script, and Pippi Vermeulen and Benny, Scully and Ellis, Benny and myself, and a young man who I invited for the ride, we were going to do a tour of Lesotho. Now Lesotho is Karl's stamping ground. He cut his teeth there after he was manhandled by the SAF. So he knows like the back of his hand. And the Globe Swift is a delightful aeroplane, but it's not very forgiving, and its performance is not too sparkling, especially at that altitude. And I got airborne first, and I circled overhead. Then we got airborne on a Cherokee 235. And I watched him take off and just sink into the valley. And I thought, oh my God, it's not going to end well. Well, whatever he did to clear the plugs or clear the throat or whatever it was, he got back on the ground. And now we had 2 airplanes and 6 guys. I didn't land again because I thought if I went back in, I probably wouldn't get back out. So Flippy and his son, there were 2 Super Cups. Scully flew one and Mike Wade flew the other. And that other one belonged to Adrian Fisher. So they put 2 guys in the back seat, and we flew to Richie's Hook, or what was the place? Mahali's Hook, where we were met by the local fraternity and had a whale of a time, except Scully decided to do what Scully does with airplanes and go water skiing. Mike Wade's flying just behind him, and a duck went underwater to miss Scully and came out behind him. And if you look at the leading edge of the cup, there's a bit of duck damage on it too. So that was an adventure.
That incidentally is the incidentally is at Simonkong, and those falls are the Maletsanyani Falls, which are 193 meters high, 630 foot high.
What a sight.
Okay, and the end of the story was when that Super Cub was to be returned to the owner, who sadly has passed on, but they had to snaffled that aeroplane out of there and get it to a place, and they repaired it before they took it back to him, which I thought was quite decent of them. Right.
Okay. Scully introduced me to a delightful guy called Stu Davidson, who's a demolition merchant by trade, but a collector of airplanes. He's owned a Sea Fury and a Russian Yak-2, and he bought 2 Army surplus Harvards. And Scully and I went to fetch them at Waterloo to fly them down to PE. And here we are about to get into these beasts, and we took off. I was in close formation with Scully, and Scully really misbehaved himself. We went through Grand Central Circuit at about 50 feet. He then went down and beat the shit out of Sanders School, and by then I thought, well, we're toast. And only when we pulled out of Joburg, we've been being very naughty, that I looked back and I saw fuel pouring, streaming out of the left-hand fuel tank cap. So I flew up alongside Scully and I said, bad news. And we landed at Monorail Park, because it was still there, and we refueled. I think we lost about 30 litres out of this. And it turned out that the fuel cap that the Harvard men in over got a little pin that's supposed to drop into a little hole. Somebody in the wisdom had made 2 holes. So when the pin dropped into the first hole, that's where I thought it was it, and it wasn't. It should have gone to the second hole, and therefore there was a leak, and therefore it leaked out. We routed very low level to stay under the President's air race, and we landed at Good Dam, which has changed its name. And we refueled there. I said, Scully, if we open the oil caps, and there's no oil in there, what are we going to do? He said, we're not going to open the oil caps. So we climbed back in and flew down to Stu Davis and then happily arrived. About 1975, this green one up there was a famous Beach 18 that belonged to Sumer Mining Corporation, which was in ultra concourse to elegance condition, and it got traded in on a Mitsubishi MU2, and a guy in the Sardine bought it to form a shuttle to Joburg. And his pilot had to go on a 10 days leave, and he asked me to come and fly. So that was my introduction to the Beach 18. That was a Super 18. Subsequently, Flippy bought, from Mercy Air, bought this one. The ones that are flying past have got the nose like the green one has. Flippy had to put that Pinocchio nose on there because he used it on safari, and if you put 8 people in the back, there's no baggage space, so you have to make that horrible nose there to make it viable. Okay. We're getting towards the end of the show, if you haven't all fallen asleep by now. And I retired when I got to 65. The rules of the game at EAA said over 65, no overboard flying. And that cut me off at the knees. I had flown for Robos and I'd flown for the historic stroke Sky Class. And then I was cut off at the knees, and I was also flying for Air Namibia as an instructor on 1900s. And 10 years ago, it was Klaus, Daisy's Cotton Picket Socks, said to me one day, there's an air show at Krugersdorp and I need your help. I said, sure, I'll come and help. So I got in his airplane and I said, what do you need me for? He said, no, I just want some company. So I sat there and we arrived at Krugersdorp, and he took me down to this hangar. And in the hangar, on the right-hand side, it's coming up next, in the hangar was this air camp. Now, there was an air camp for years based in Maun, and I used to drool over this thing. And there in this hangar was the air camp. And there was a delightful character there that I met that day called Ricardo. And Ricardo said to me, I haven't got a Super Cub rating. I said, okay, you get the Super Cub rating and I get a Twin Cab rating. And that was 10 years ago, and it was been an amazing friendship ever since. Just go back one shot if you may. A couple of months afterwards, I had a call from Professor Barry Jacobson, who I didn't know from Barso, and he said that he just wanted to Comanche, and I said, "Hey, you lucky bugger." He said, "Well, I've got it on my license, but the man who delivered the airplane to Rand Airport scared himself shitless on the delivery flight, and he said, if I'm not checked out, I'll kill myself." I think, and Jeff Earl told me you were an airplane whisperer. So I said, yeah, I'll be delighted. So I went and flew with Barry. And in 2 sessions I said, "Barry, you're as good as it gets. I can't teach you any more on a Jim Comanche that you can't do already." And he paid me a huge compliment, for which I have since been eternally grateful. He said to me, "Yeah, I can see I can fly, but I really enjoy flying with you, so why don't you just come for the ride?" Now, the reason for the airplane, and I hope I'm not going to tell tales out of school here, is that it's a research aircraft because Barry is a world-class hematologist, and he specializes in DVT, which, if you don't know, is the things you get in your calves when you fly in the back of the airplane. And his task on that airplane is to go to 19,000 feet with those 2 girls were guinea pigs that he found. We were going to fly them to 19,000 feet to do whatever blood tests, which he will need to sit here and tell you about for an hour, because I can't. And so, in the last 10 years of my flying career, which is now ended, thank goodness, because I think enough is enough, I've met up to 2 wonderful friends, and I have been very, very privileged ever since. Okay. Yes. The Dragon Repeat.
Yeah, I would like to just get to the next one, combine it.
Okay.
That one.
The Dragon Repeat belonged to a man called John English. He was a very taciturn fellow who ran a flying school in Port Elizabeth, and he bought and went to the Seychelles to fetch the Repeat and restored it. And apparently didn't do a very good restoration because eventually got divorced. And his wife got custody of the Dragon Repeat, which he then sold to a delightful guy called Mark Sard, who was a friend of John Hillsby. To cut long story short, John had spent several years, and he needs to sit here and tell you the story about that little Aronka, which had flown out from England, single pilot, in 1936. Now, to cut long story short, Mark Sard had that aircraft restored cosmetically, and the guy who restored it had a brake malfunction on landing. It tipped up on its nose, and it involved a major rebuild after that. And in that major rebuild, they found it had serious cancer in the main spar and other things. So when it was finally finished, it was concourse to elegance cubed. But they needed a pilot, and John English, having lost the Repeat to his wife, said he wasn't interested. So John English came to me and said, "Do you want to fly?" I said, "I'd love to, but there's a guy more capable than me who I think should fly this together." So Flippy and I climbed in the thing. You can see it's a single pilot, single seat cockpit, and got in and flew it. Flippy flew it up to Queenstown for him and brought it up for the air show where it appeared with John Elsie's little C3. Now I flew that little, I managed to twist John's arm to let me fly to the Grand Air Show. I was privileged to do the opening shot, and there's the very poignant photograph of the 2 airplanes. Subsequently, Flippy checked me out of the Repeat, and I was privileged subsequent to that to check Scully Levine out. In my case, it was my heart in my mouth flying that thing alone. In Scully's case, it was a playful, because that's the kind of guy he is.
Brian, I want to, there's a whole stack of stuff here, but we're running out of time, so I'd just like to go into a couple of things. These are the airplanes that Brian flew. He mentioned the 707, and there is the first one, Alpha November, the Bombo, which is actually standing outside, landing it on its initial flight. Arriving here, Brian went on to fly the 748. As he told you, he did a test on with Joan, did his timing, John Withers, in that as a test. Flew the 727 as a co-pilot, and then the
AC-100.
Yeah.
Then came back as a captain on 737s, which I flew for 10 years. And halfway through that, SAA was going through a huge transformation, and they ran out of instructors. Now, until that point, a trainee captain in SAA was Royal Family. Only the chosen few, etc., etc., etc. And they decided to recruit hoary old line captains like myself to be training captains. And John Withers got hold of me one day and said, "Would you like to be training captain?" I said, "No." He was horrified. I mean, that was like an invitation to Cinderella's ball, and I said, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because you guys are flogging your instructors to death. You're working them too hard." So he shrugged his shoulders in disgust and left. And that night I had a call from Doc Milan. And I thought, oh, here comes shit. Doc said, "I want to see you in the morning. I have to make you an offer you can't understand." I said, "Okay, Doc, I'll come quietly." And then became a training captain. And remained so for the 15 odd years I had left in the airline. One little anecdote. After I flew the J-52 with Scully as my instructor, and Brian Wallace, Scully said, "Why did you become an instructor on the J-52? I said, "Love to." He said, "I'll sort it out." So he goes to the Royal Family and he says, "I want to make Stableford an instructor on the J-52. I said, "He's not a training captain." He said, "So what?" He has no ambition to become a training captain, but he'd like to fly the J-52. So with a lot of arm wrestling, they said to Scully, "Tell Stableford he can become an instructor on the J-52 if he's prepared to forego the privileges of the training section." I said, "What a pleasure." That's the story. Okay, the last flight I did was in the Smarty Box. Now, Karl flew in the Smarty Box to the Atlanta Olympics, for which they had to position him in New York. And they didn't have any crews to fly this flight, so they scoured the training section, and a delightful rogue who since left SAA called John White and I flew to New York, where we had to sit and twiddle our thumbs while Karl did these Atlanta operations.
Well, and when we landed in Atlanta, the guy said, "Hey, nice paint job, Spring Bob." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Did you do it yourself?" Just as a matter of interest, there is so much more to Brian that he ran the cargo section of the air cargo section of SAA all over the world. But I'd just like to mention here that was just inside one of the airplanes. You can just see the enormous size of it. I think it could take about 80 tons of...
Karl, the primary job, originally the sister ship of the Helderberg came back from Garuda, and SAA decided to make it a cargo airplane. And its primary job, we used to fly 105 tons of fish to a place in Spain called Victoria twice a week. That was his primary job. We subsequently acquired a second 747, and then Coleman Andrews ran out of air-speaking ideas and everything started with purpose.
Okay. There's just as a matter of interest, that's 50 years and 1 day ago that it did its first flight.
Holy smokes. Oh, amazing. Okay, after I left SAA, I flew for the historic flight, which became known as Skyclass. And one of the jobs I had there, having done the freighter on the 747, was to fly an Air Botswana freight contract. So we used to fill the poor DC-4 up to the gunwales with all sorts of crap. It was a milk run for us, really.
Brian, I'm sorry I'm flashing through this.
Yes, no, sure.
But there are a certain number of people that were really influential in Brian's flying career, especially in the airline. If you'd like to make mention of that.
Okay, I'd like to wind up by saying that, I'm sitting here in the Flying Legends show, but really, believe me, I'm not a legend, but I have flown with legends. Johnny Woods, Mickey Mitchell, Andres, Laurie Roth, Nicky Vermeulen, last but not least, were the guys that gave me the opportunity to do things with airplanes that most people only ever get to dream about. And for that, I am eternally grateful, and for that is the reason I'm sitting here today. Karl Jensen, notwithstanding, he and I, but one little clip I needed to tell you, and he tried to sneak past. My very first flight with Karl Jensen was in a 707. He was the co-pilot, and I was the boy pilot. We were going to Las Palmas. We used to land in Las Palmas on average at about 5 in the morning. It was always dark, and he was doing the flying, and he would be on the seaward side, and the island would be on the left. The captain was leading, looking out the window, and the whole place was lit up with farms and greenhouses and shit houses and whatever. And one particular place was particularly well lit up. And he made a comment. He said, "Wow, look at that place. It's all lit up." And without batting an eyelid, and I knew here comes shit for the rest of my life, Jensen says, "It must be a Spanish fly farm, sir." And he never, Karl could speak the Portuguese accent without a trace of the language.
Brian was held in extremely high regard with his management capability. He flew, when he left the airline after that bust-up, he went to Seychelles, Air Seychelles, and he ran Air Seychelles for a year as an ops manager. He went to Air Namibia at Mickey Mitchell's behest and he was the ops manager there for a year. He came along to Rovos, and that is a very long tail, that can take a whole evening, where he became the chief pilot and sorted out Rovos where it was having a very shoddy operation, and unfortunately, the accident that happened right at the end, that had nothing to do with Rovos. But there's a tremendous story behind that as well. He was also sent to, by Mickey Mitchell to one time where he did 2 months.
Yeah. One time phoned me up. Mickey did some auditing at one time, and the chief pilot there at Mickey's behest, in fact, I think Dave Taylor sent me into the deep end. This guy phoned me up and said, "Would you like a job?" And after about a 10-second pause, I said, "No." And then another 10-second pause, I said, "You obviously got a problem. Can I help you?" And he said, "Yes. Our manager training has just gone to Comair, and the post is an accountable person post, and you cannot have it vacant." I said, "Piers, I'll tell you what. I'll come and work for you for 2 months. And you've got 2 months to find where we're looking for." At the time, and I don't want to drag this on too long, one time we got into bed with a guy, a Frenchman here, who bought an Army surplus MD-82 simulator. And this guy was very naughty, and the result was the CIA grounded it. And there was a gunfight at the OK Corral, and Colin Yudon had been seconded from SAA to save CIA from failing their K orbit, which he successfully did. But he came into the middle of this revolution, or this revolt in the simulator section, and he agreed that the CIA would back off and give this Frenchman a 30-day lease of life or lease of agreement. And I realized that this wasn't going to work, so I went to Mickey Mitchell and I said, Mickey, there's only one guy on earth who can pull this iron out of this fire, and that's you. And Mickey did what he was brilliant at in sorting the fly ship from the pepper. And I'm not going to bore you with the story, but the approval, EAA approved that simulator a month after Mickey died. It was like his epitaph, if you like, for which he certainly, my undying respect for Mickey. I never worked for a guy who was more astute. Mickey took over flight operations 14 days before the Hildeberg crashed. And if you want to have a baptism of fire from hell, you climb into that hot seat and have 2 weeks to get your act together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian. I would really love to have carried on, but I do believe we've really gone quite a while over. Thank you indeed, and perhaps, Mike, you could just give me that behind there. The white one. I'm going to ask Sean to hand this to you. Sean, if you're awake. Yeah, okay. As the chairman of EAA of South Africa, it's
Sure. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Another 3 hours, we could hear the rest.
3 days maybe.
Sean, just go there again, stand next to each other.
Okay. I don't know what the label says, but I'm very grateful for it. I know which side, so I'm very grateful.
Not yours.
no. I wrapped it.
Contempo.
Oh, yeah.
Contempo who? Contemporarily. Wow.
Isn't that pretty?
Is there one inside? Can I open this one?
No, not yet. Let me take a photo first. Other way around. The pretty side.
That's just in case it gets lost. It's wrapped in a Jefferson chart.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for your patience tonight.
And thanks and congratulations and well done to Maury and the team that have put this all together here this evening.
Thank you, sir.